Chapter 149, Stop Causing Me Trouble. The glaring shock within Conrad's eyes perplexed Yvonne, who couldn't hear the ongoing communication. Wolfgang, do you have a space treasure? No, I do not. Conrad wanted to ask Wolfgang to knock Nils out and hide her in a space treasure, but it seemed he would have to give up that task. He also considered asking him to leave Nils alone in the cracked mansion while bringing all his kinsmen away, but due to the third prince's impending arrival, he also had to discontinue that plan. All right, I will send someone to deal with this. He needed someone fast enough to get there, grab her, and leave before the third prince could show up. For the sake of not appearing too obvious, he would undoubtedly search other houses first. Therefore, there was still some time. However, the job not only required a saint-level cultivation base, but it also demanded someone able to go undetected. Only Kron fit all the requirements. Therefore, Conrad asked Yvonne to dismiss the maid, then summoned him. Greetings, master. How may I serve you? The sudden appearance of the monstrous familiar caused another wave of puzzlement within Yvonne's mind. Still, she restrained her questions, sensing the gravity in Conrad's deeds. Use your transformation skill to change your appearance and hide your energy signature, then dive into Housecrack to capture this girl, undetected. Conrad sent Nils' image to Kron before carrying on. Bring her to a secluded spot, away from the city, wait for the storm to pass, then tell her that if she wants to see me again, she should first stop causing me trouble. You have 5 seconds, go. Instantaneously, Kron turned into a suave, middle-aged man with no discernible aura or cultivation. He then vanished from the scene, using his saint-level speed to cross the distance separating them from Housecracked in the blink of an eye. Long before Lawrence could arrive with his troops, Kron descended on the cracked mansion, knocked out Nils, and carried her outside of the city, all within the span of 5 seconds. As per Conrad's orders, he kept her there, waiting for Lauren's team to enter and leave Housecracked in failure. Following Adler's will, Lauren searched 6 noble houses before heading toward Wolfgang's. Before you grab her, do not reveal any flaw. Act as if she merely snuck out of the palace without warning, and you're carrying out a routine search. It will still raise questions, but when matched with the interrogation she must have put Wolfgang under, he shouldn't have too many doubts. Then once you find her, declare the charge and kill them all. Adler's words still echoed within Lauren's ears. Soon, he reached Wolfgang's gate, and when they saw his golden robe, the guards fell on their knees. Greetings, Your Highness. Lawrence presented an imperial token, proof that he was acting under the Emperor's order. The guards didn't dare stop him, and undisturbed, he walked in, bringing with him his small corps. Although the guards couldn't bar his path, they still needed to report to their master. Therefore, they rushed back inside to announce Lauren's arrival. Soon, Wolfgang stepped out, welcoming the third prince with due decorum. Your Highness, may I know what brings you to my humble house? Nothing much. For some reason, that willful sister of mine escaped the palace in the dark of night. We've been looking for her since we discovered her escape, even browsing through the noble houses in the vicinity to seek clues. People say she had a good relationship with your deceased son-in-law. Perhaps she's here to visit his grave? In any case, it's good if she's here. If she's not, we will conduct a small search for due diligence, then carry on. Lawrence replied, with an amiable smile. Inwardly, Wolfgang sneered. Had Conrad not revealed the ploy and taken appropriate countermeasures, he would have truly died full of grievances. Fortunately, one could always count on that cheap boss. Your Highness is polite. Since this matter concerns the princess, please feel free to search. Lawrence frowned. Such a reply didn't follow the script. Normally, Wolfgang should have directed him toward Nils. Why was he acting as if she weren't here? But quickly, he recomposed himself, and with a smile, dispatched his team to conduct the search. However, as it carried on, Lauren's face formed an ugly grimace. Nils was nowhere to find. The semi-saints and transcendent knights swept every corner of Housecracked, but to no avail. Your Highness, why doesn't this seem like a routine search? It almost looks like you're convinced you should find the princess here? Wolfgang inquired with a deep frown. How could that be? Lawrence began, but Wolfgang cut him dry. Although I'm no longer involved in court politics, I was elevated to the rank of Margrave by His Majesty himself. Ransacking my domain in such a wanton manner for no reason seems a bit improper. Should I send the bill? Or maybe gather my former colleagues to file an official petition? The more Wolfgang spoke, the more Lawrence felt like he was making fun of him, and nerves beat on his temple. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Margrave Wolfgang, please accept my most sincere apologies. Lawrence declared in a deep bow and recalled the troops. As for the bill, I will personally pay you back the triple. Feel free to send it. Lawrence then turned heels and took his leave. I definitely will, Wolfgang exclaimed while waving the third prince goodbye. Once Kron received Conrad's signal that all was clear, he woke Nils from her torpor. Where? Who are you? She asked, startled by the sudden change in scenery. One moment she was still questioning Wolfgang, the next she was standing in the outskirts of the imperial city with a foreign, middle-aged man by her side. Today, your stupidity almost caused the destruction of an entire house. He asked me to tell you that if you don't stop causing him trouble, you will never see him again. Nils was confused. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Who are you talking of? Wait, Anselm? But Kron said nothing more, vanishing into nothingness, leaving a dumbfounded Nils to fend for herself. At that time, the bracelet on her wrist glittered in white light, and she forgot everything following her meeting with Adelar. She then vanished from where she stood, reappearing before the palace's gate, unconscious. Except that this time, she no longer had the bracelet on her. Meanwhile, within his quarters, Adelar was reading a scroll when a fuming Lawrence barged in. We've been conned. Somehow, that Wolfgang was aware of our ploy and got rid of her beforehand. But I don't understand. How did he know? And how did he do it without alerting the spies I prepared? Toward this fit of fury, Adelar remained unfazed. That attitude of his only caused Lawrence to grow more restless. Calm down. However, when those two words left Adelar's lips, Lawrence didn't dare make a move, sitting still like an obedient dog. The loose ends have been taken care of, and the prodigal daughter returned. Father will know someone from the inside plotted this, but he won't be able to trace it back to us. That being the case, why such restlessness? You need to temper your nerves. Lawrence pulled in a deep breath, regaining his composure. Aren't you the least bit annoyed at having your plot foiled? If the plot is foiled, the orchestrator is at fault. Instead of beating myself over it, shouldn't I learn from my mistakes to prevent such a thing from happening again? Adelar's words made Lawrence realize his lack of vision. I was short-sighted. My apologies, second brother. Adelar set aside his scroll and stood up. However, this whole thing wasn't without gain. Lawrence was confused. The only thing he gained was bills to pay. How is that a good thing? Still, he didn't dare interrupt Adelar. At least now I know exactly where our opponent lies. Lawrence's confusion deepened, and he could no longer restrain himself. Second brother, please elaborate. There is no way Wolfgang could have known what was coming for him. Vague suspicions maybe, but such prompt actions show that he'd been alerted of our ploy beforehand and took the adequate countermeasures. Calculating timing, it means that within this palace, there is someone that learned of Nils' abduction and also knew that she currently was residing with Wolfgang. That person alerted him. But you're right on one thing. Wolfgang doesn't have the skills to evade our spies. Therefore, I conclude that person must have also helped him ship Nils somewhere, and as I erased her memories, I saw the glimpses of a brief talk with some unknown middle-aged man. Lauren's eyes shone with understanding. Now that we know our opponent is in this very palace, isn't everything simpler? We'll find him, skewer him, and get rid of that nuisance once and for all. Adelar's eyes flashed with a bone-chilling glint. However, his gentle smile remained unchanged. Chapter 150 Ulrich's Pride and Fear. Back within Yvonne's quarter, Conrad lied with the back of his head against her chest while she massaged his temple. I still don't understand. Who in this palace would be so bold as to make Nils the bait for such a scheme? Or was our opponent that confident that no one could trace it back to him? Could it be a von Jürgen Saint Elder? Conrad didn't consider the imperial princes. To his knowledge, Elmar was the most outstanding of them all, but even he didn't have such skills. The opponent was not only crafty but possessed profound, elusive means that allowed him to evade detection from even saints. Unlikely, I know all the von Jürgen elders. Most of them train in seclusion and don't bother with empire politics. As for the rare few who do, they've long since become Ulrich's loyal subordinates. They wouldn't thread on such risky territory just for the sake of eliminating Housecraft. As the events unfolded, Conrad had shared the whole matter with Yvonne, hoping to use her experience and knowledge of the imperial family to find clues. However, they couldn't find much. Unsurprisingly, the thought of a hidden enemy making untraceable moves against him put Conrad ill at ease. If the answer is not among those we know well, what about those we don't? Conrad asked while Yvonne carried on with the head massage. The only member of the imperial family I don't have a clear understanding of is the second prince. Oh, elaborate. Yvonne shook her head. There really isn't much to say. He's very low-key and rarely leaves his quarters. Of Ulrich's 9 children, he's the third most favored. Yet, he doesn't involve himself in court politics and never contends with Elmar for the crown. At least not openly. Yvonne began, but then, as if recalling something, she furrowed her eyebrows. However, I remember that in one of his trouble-seeking visits, Ulrich mentioned that it's both a blessing and a pity that his crown prince is nothing like him. By his crown prince, Ulrich, of course, referred to Elmar. For him to speak such words, the second prince couldn't just be an unremarkable person. In the future, Conrad resolved to pay him more attention. Though now, with Elmar's demotion, he will be pushed into the limelight as the next crown prince. Conrad nodded. I wonder what the girl will have to say when she returns. What is your relationship with her that she acts so recklessly when you're concerned? Could she be one of your conquests? Yvonne asked, her tone a mixture of teasing and amusement. What conquest? The one time I'm actually trying to avoid someone, and it ends creating all these problems. Nils and I are not a good fit. This only goes 2 ways. I either corrupt her or don't touch her. I'm starting to lean on the former. Conrad replied with a sigh. It was very likely that the mind meld left too deep an impression on Nils and caused her to gradually foster romantic feelings for him. And when she learned of his death, those feelings exploded. Oh, Yvonne, why can't other women be like you? If they were, wouldn't you get bored? True. I'd probably just kill them all to again make you unique. Not if I kill them first. Yvonne then took Conrad's lips into hers for an impromptu kiss. Meanwhile, Nils remained unconscious on Ulrich's bed. He sat by her side, silently watching over her, with anger burning in his eyes. The whole situation was incomprehensible. Someone kidnapped, then sent her back without an ounce of physical harm? What was the meaning of this? But while Ulrich's fury burned, Nils' eyelids trembled and slowly, she awoke. Her eyes opened to the sight of Ulrich sitting by her side. Father? She asked, her tone still feeble. Don't move. Can you tell me what happened? Ulrich asked while preventing Nils from standing up. Nils browsed through her memories, trying to recall the scenes, but following her mother's visit, only darkness remained. I can't remember. With a frown, Ulrich placed his hand on Nils' forehead, spreading his holy force within her mind. His frown deepened. Your memories have been tampered with. No wonders. Although you don't have any physical damage, you're this exhausted. Don't worry, just lie down and rest. Father won't let anything else happen to you. With his holy force, Ulrich induced Nils into sleep and stood up. He then headed toward the morgue, where the dead guards were currently being examined. There, the coroner awaited alongside the 2 dead bodies. What did you find? Ulrich asked, his voice stern and demanding results. The coroner trembled, but with the situation being what it was, he didn't dare lie. In nothing, there is no physical injury whatsoever. Such an answer couldn't please Ulrich. However, instead of lashing out at the coroner, he stepped toward the corpses and placed his hands on their foreheads. Using his holy force, he personally analyzed them. The results were inconsequential. They suffered absolutely no physical harm. Thus, we can infer that they died from a spiritual attack. But how could this be? Those guards were both mid-level semi-holy knights. Only for Nil's protection could Ulrich dispatch such manpower. If anyone heard that a confined princess of the arch rank was being guarded by semi-saints, they would have burst into laughter. But now, it seemed his preparations were still insufficient. Starting with the transcendent priest rank, anyone could use spiritual attacks. However, to kill mid-level semi-holy knights with those alone, the murderer should either be a holy priest or a high-level semi-holy priest with incomparably formidable soul power. Priests of the semi-holy rank or above were in short supply in the imperial family, most of them already serving the church. Therefore, the list wasn't that exhaustive. Could it be him? Ulrich's mind drifted to Adelar. However, he dismissed the thought. The night Nils vanished, his spies confirmed that Adelar had never left his quarters. How could he be at two places at the same time? He was not a saint. Within the imperial palace, there were only two people Ulrich kept under close watch: Yvonne and Adelar. The former, out of possessiveness, the later, out of fear. Ulrich truly worried that while he slept, that good son of his would surpass and butcher him. If Elmar carried his greatest expectations and Nils his deepest love, then Adelar was his pride and joy. That being the case, he couldn't kill him. Not now. The love still had to grow before the executioner's axe dropped to fuel his rise. "You can't stay here anymore," Yvonne told Conrad as they frolicked within her bed. "Sniff, are you chasing me?" "Don't be daft." Yvonne rolled her eyes, feeling that acting spoiled really didn't suit Conrad. "You're right. It's time to go back to the Empress and report accomplishments. I will tell her how I managed to conquer you and get rewards." With the Emperor's tendency to dispatch spies toward Yvonne's quarters, if Conrad didn't depart, it wouldn't be long before Ulrich received news that one eunuch remained in Yvonne's quarters. They didn't need such publicity at the moment. It was time to go. Chapter 151, Reporting Accomplishment. "Take this." Yvonne waved her hand, summoning a 1-meter-long broadsword which she extended toward Conrad. Lifting it by the flat of the blade, Conrad appraised it for a moment before grabbing its jade handle and giving it a few swings. "A low-grade holy artifact," he assessed. "At the moment, this should be your limit. A higher grade, and you most likely won't be able to exert 1% of its power. Alas, I don't have a hammer to offer you." Conrad's cultivation was just reaching the middle stages of the transcendent rank. He could indeed not wield mightier holy artifacts at his current level. "Hey, how can you be so cheap? I heard the Tower of Rebirth hides god artifacts. Say, you wouldn't be concealing one from me, right?" Yvonne rolled her eyes, knowing Conrad merely jested. There was no artifact on the infernal cult founder's body. If he truly possessed a god artifact, then it's buried elsewhere. That or someone grabbed it already. Though, I highly doubt that. Someone capable of plundering the infernal founder's remains should have also obtained a large quantity of divine ascension sage blood. Such a person would have surely become a world hegemon dominating the two continents. To this day, no one matched such accomplishments. Since this is my head consort's gift, I will naturally accept it. Conrad hid the sword in his space pouch and readied himself to take his leave. Yvonne then wrote a letter, sealed it with her noble imperial consort token, and handed it over to Conrad. "For the Empress to believe in your success." Conrad directly pocketed the letter, not bothering checking its content, for he knew that whatever Yvonne wrote should be enough for Verena to believe him. He held that much faith in her. As for Yvonne, she appreciated the gesture. "My lady, my man, I will miss you," they said in tandem before Conrad activated his invisibility skill and left for Verena's quarters. He, of course, didn't intend to reveal all he'd done during his time with Yvonne. A mixture of truth and falsehood should be enough to satisfy Verena's appetite. In any case, it was time to seize the Empress. Once he stood far from Yvonne's quarters, Conrad dispelled the invisibility, then used the inner court's teleportation circles to reach the Empress Palace in the shortest of times. Having received orders to not block his path, the unit guards let him in, and led by maids, he soon reached Verina's chambers. "Come in." Verina's voice came from behind the door, and alone, Conrad stepped in. As per usual, she lied within her sofa, but when Conrad walked in, she shifted into a seated position with her legs crossed and her silver eyes eyeing him from head to toe. "Seems like you've been doing well for yourself. Isn't your Majesty wondering how I'm still alive?" News that Ulrich burned all of Yvonne's eunuchs to ashes had already spread within the palace. That being the case, it stood to reason that Verina should have considered him dead. However, her lips curled into a smile. "Considering how much attention Else pays you, your relationship can't be simple. If you were truly dead, how could she sit still? Perhaps she would have already dropped all pretense to attack Ulrich. Since Else is not worried, why should I be?" Conrad had forgotten that detail. "Moreover, I know Yvonne has 25 eunuchs, but only 24 were reported dead. Where could the last one possibly be?" Originally, Yvonne only had 24 eunuchs. The 25th was naturally Conrad. "Your Majesty makes sense. Since you've returned, I assume the task is complete. Congratulations, Your Majesty. From now on, Yvonne Voigt will have nothing to do with the Holy Consort." Conrad bowed and presented Yvonne's letter to Verina. Reading it, her face brightened. In that letter, Yvonne claimed that as long as Verina took good care of Conrad, from now on, she would have her full support. "How did you do it?" Verina didn't believe Conrad could seduce someone like Yvonne, only hoping that he could slowly gain her trust to sow dissension between Else and her. However, the letter clearly showed he'd earned her absolute favor. She couldn't help but wonder how. "I withstood 100 of her moves at the same level." Verina's eyes widened in shock. "You, what?" Regardless of how talented, Verina didn't put Conrad on Yvonne's level. It wasn't that she looked down on him, but many hegemons of this era had miserably failed in that task. To say nothing of others. Just knowing that the Celestial Church's prime disciple couldn't do it was enough to prove how impossible a task it was. What secret skill did Conrad possess that he could succeed where all others failed? "It seems like I underestimated you." Still, Verina didn't lose sight of her priorities. Since Conrad managed to get that close to Yvonne and evade Ulrich's palm, perhaps he also found out the secret. "Did she give you any pertinent information regarding the Emperor?" Now it was Conrad's turn to be baffled. Never did he expect Verina to directly ask such a question. "Don't look at me like that. Since you've survived that disaster, you must now know Ulrich's true nature. Although such behavior only shows up when Yvonne is concerned, it is still there. The man even killed his son. How could I not be afraid for my life? To tell you the truth, a decade after I married him, I discovered that Ulrich smuggled dozens of newborns into the palace. They all vanished within his quarters, never to resurface. What he did with them, I do not know, but since then, I spied on the smuggling process from the shadows. He was very cautious, only doing it once a year, and targeting the lowest echelon of society. But several decades afterward, his cultivation skyrocketed, reaching the holy rank. Therefore, it is not hard to guess that he must have used them in some forbidden art to achieve sainthood. Verina explained. This whole newborn refining thing was the main reason why she didn't dare bear Ulrich children, dreading what he might one day do with them. Your Majesty is correct. According to the noble consort, the Emperor refined the souls of 1,000 newborns to establish his holy foundation. Although she'd already guessed the truth, thinking of the 1,000 wailing infant souls, Verina still shivered. However, she quickly recomposed herself. What or who's next? The loved ones. Verina trembled while her eyes widened in disbelief. All of us? From mother to children, from friend to lover. All of you. No exception. Conrad reaffirmed. Seeing all her fears realized, Verina felt a crushing weight drop on her shoulders. The realization that centuries of care were nothing more than means to fatten her for the execution block struck her hard. But soon afterward, determination shone within her eyes. That being the case, I cannot just wait for death. Before he kills me, I must kill him, Verena exclaimed while clenching her thigh. Conrad found that reaction particularly satisfying and nodded in approval. What is your Majesty's plan? Verena breathed in and out, cooling her emotions. The simplest method is to warn the Dowager. Alas, he's her last child in this world. I don't doubt that the worst she'll do is cripple him. With such a fiend, we can't afford to leave room for comebacks. Crippling is far from enough. He must die, period. Therefore, we'll have to do this ourselves. Thankfully, there is support. I suspect Else is also aware of the truth and making her own preparations. I tested the waters on several occasions, and each time I mention the possibility of Ulrich using a forbidden art, she never shows surprise. With her help and the support of our fathers, murdering one Ulrich is not that difficult. We just need to create an opportunity to do it without raising alarm. We can't afford to have the world know it was done by us. This will need further preparations. Hearing Verena's explanation, Conrad frowned. Why not tip the head exarch? With such information, he would never hesitate to put Ulrich to death. However, seeing Verena's reaction, Conrad realized the issue within his words. Are you out of your mind? That art is most likely of demonic origin. The sentence for demonism is always family extermination. There is no exception. If the church learns of this, Ulrich certainly dies, but all of us follow him to the grave. Ah, he'd almost forgotten about that detail. Chapter 152. Let me help you relax. Sensing Venera's overflowing tension, Conrad reckoned it was time to move on to the next phase. Hum. Your Majesty, I can feel that you've accumulated a lot of tension. As your loyal servant, it's my duty to help you relax. Would you allow me to resume with the massages? Conrad offered with a bright, innocent smile that outmatched any child's. Seeing that sudden show of goodwill, Verena frowned. Although Conrad had agreed to serve her for a year, he'd never called himself her loyal servant. What was wrong with him? However, she indeed was in desperate needs of relaxation, something only Conrad's magical hands seemed able to provide. In fact, during the weeks he spent in Yvonne's palace, Verena suffered from Conrad massage withdrawal. It was time to feed bad habits. Her frown dispersed, replaced by a pair of blinking eyes matched with an enchanting smile. I didn't expect you to be so forward after your return. Seems like Yvonne trained you well. I will have to thank her for that. Conrad wanted to say that in this case, he did the training but felt that such words should wait for another time. Bringing in a treatment table, Conrad motioned for Verena to lie onto it, which she did without hesitation. Naturally, Verena wasn't going to remove her clothes. The boy hadn't earned that honor, yet. As she lied on her back, Conrad had to admit that Verena's hourglass figure was a marvel. He took a second to appreciate it before getting to work. If with his current bloodline level, he only needed a glance to dominate semi-saint females, for saints such as the Empress, he had to exert some methods and show some care. He began innocently, massaging the Empress' hands and wrists before gradually moving on her arms and descending on her stomach. Wherever he went, his touch relaxed Verena, whose vigilance was never raised in the first place. By the time he finished with her feet and asked for her to shift onto her back, she did so without delay, failing to realize that every time he pressed a point, Conrad injected a thin quantity of formless energy into her body. For some reason, she felt more and more at ease within his hands. Thus, when he lowered the straps of her dress, she didn't complain. In any case, it was a backless dress, to begin with. Purple flames coated Conrad's hands, and as he traced Verena's back, they snuck into her body, lodging themselves within her. The pressure he applied on her back then increased, and taken by surprise, Verena yelped. Aya! Conrad's hands then descended onto Verena's thighs, infecting them with the desire flames while he carried on with the outwardly innocent massage. He then rose toward that captivating rear hiding beneath the dress and gave Verena's ass a bold squeeze. For a reason she couldn't understand, Verena didn't resist, finding the touch even more pleasurable. Conrad concluded it was time to bring this massage to a grand finale. His eyes shone with purple light as the desire flames bypassed Verina's clothes to infect her rear. Then, he let it all explode. Purple steam rose from Verina's pores while the silent desire flames erupted within her and kindled her arousal. Her face flushed red, and her inner thighs moistened at breakneck speed. "Oh, what's happening to me? Why does this feel so good?" "It's a special technique passed down by my ancestors. Don't worry about a thing, and just enjoy it." Conrad lifted Verina's dress to her waist, revealing her bare, sumptuous legs and marvelous ass that begged attention. He pulled her laced underwear aside, letting her juice flow onto the table while he caressed her dripping cunt. Inserting the first finger, Conrad released the desire flames directly into Verina's holy garden, causing her rationality to crumble and her mind to surrender to an eruption of lust. Although he couldn't see her glazed eyes, Conrad knew Verina vanquished. With his right hand, he fingered her juicy pussy while with the left, he massaged her lower back and ass. "Oh, right there, yes. Oh, oh, oh." Though she was no maiden, Verina couldn't resist Conrad's succulent touch and quickly fell to her first orgasm, squirting her juice all over his hand. "A squirter. Good. Gotta love them," Conrad commented while pulling out his fingers to taste the Empress juices. He then spread open her ass cheeks, revealing her pink butthole that seemed animated with a breath of its own, telling him to put something in. Conrad understood its message, bending between Verina's legs with his lips facing her dripping, sensitive flower while his lubricated finger poked her butthole from above. "Wait, what are you?" But Verina wasn't given time to finish her words before Conrad's finger dived in, using the torrid mixture between her juice and his saliva to lubricate and invade her hole. "Ooh, son of a bitch," she groaned, both in delight and shame. "According to my knowledge, I really am the son of a bitch," Conrad acknowledged, before flicking his tongue over Verina's clit and taking it into his lips for a mind-blowing cunnilingus. Sandwiched on two fronts and unable to resist this masterful pincer attack that would have made Sun Tzu proud, Verina soon climaxed into Conrad's mouth while also experiencing her first anal orgasm. Conrad stood up, flipping the Empress onto her back to gaze upon her dreamy eyes and bountiful chest. "My Empress, what do you want your loyal servant to do?" Conrad asked while teasing Verina's erect nipples. She could barely muster the strength to speak, her arms hanging loosely by her side while Conrad played with her breasts, causing a new peak of arousal. "Fuck me." "As you command, Your Majesty." Conrad unbuckled his pants, revealing a hefty duo of meat rods that glittered in intertwining golden and purple light. He aligned the first one with Verina's cunt while the second one poked her rear door, teasing her entrances for a second before showing himself in and impaling her, front and back, all the way to the hilt. "Aya!" Verina's delightful moan echoed, spreading toward the walls. "Shush, you will alarm the maids. Then we would have to make them join. Wait, not such a bad idea." With a succession of small thrusts, Conrad familiarized himself with Verina's holes before increasing the pace and driving himself faster into her. The pounding then began. Chapter 153 Disturbed at the worst of times. Conrad kept one hand on Verina's right breast, teasing it while the other squeezed her left ass cheek. He leaned down, dropping his lips on her luscious left breast to take it within his mouth and savor its taste. Meanwhile, his hips danced against Verina's snatch, making his rods strike and create pleasure spots while their eldritch powers spread within her, corrupting her flesh and soul. Conrad's relentless hammering electrified Verina's mature body. Her breasts swayed within his lips and hand, while her legs trembled in successions of orgasms that sapped what little strength remained in her. As if seeking support, Verina tied her legs around Conrad's waist, helping him rock her body faster and harder while the musical sound of his balls kissing her ass echoed within the room. Ah, and Anne. Verina had wholly succumbed to this new realm of pleasure, climbing through all the heavens while whatever moral she held descended straight to hell. Her voracious pussy and ass sucked Conrad in, unwilling to let him go, and squeezing him with a pressure he'd rarely experienced beforehand. Seems like the dog emperor hasn't been doing well in his marital duties. Tell me, my empress, how does your servant fare when compared to your murderous husband? Conrad asked while removing his lips from Verina's tits and holding her lust-glazed eyes with his demonic purple gaze. Ah, comp compared to you. Oh, he's small and useless, just doesn't know how to fuck. Verina couldn't understand how such words could come from her lips, but at the same time, she didn't care, just wanting to keep experience the mind-blowing sensation of Conrad driving inside her. Well said. Conrad rewarded her with a kiss that contained both the taste of her cunt and tits. The rose petals of the 100 flowers scripture swirled around them, while the golden light of his holy primal physique erupted from his body to further enhance their mating. With all those forces guiding him, Conrad invaded Verina's mind, to implant the necessity of making his well-being and growth of capital importance. The barriers of her souls were too resilient to completely destroy, but implanting those commands through the many present gaps wasn't that difficult. Henceforth, one of Verina's primary concerns would be to ensure Conrad's undisturbed rise within this world, and the feeling of subduing such a woman through the animalistic use of flesh against flesh sent Conrad over the edge. Aarg! He grunted and erupted within her, releasing copious white-purple spunk that dripped down her ass to slide onto the ground while her lips formed an O shape and her eyes rolled back. She squealed in delight. The bloodline was satisfied, and so was Conrad's rod. But naturally, this was only the beginning. His lips curled into a smile, while he raised Verina by the waist, letting her use his neck as support as he carried her to her bed to continue with the breeding. Let me give you some energy to revitalize your body. Conrad let his primal force flow into Verina's body, giving her back enough strength to mate in the most barbaric of styles. She bent in impossible shapes, while Conrad took her on the bed where only Ulrich should have been allowed. Sweet Lord, more. For hours, the mating carried on, undisturbed. But clearly, the maids in the vicinity had been alerted. Their cheeks flushed red as they imagined the torrid affair and brutal mating that carried on under the emperor's nose. Of course, though those women were loyal only to Verina, Conrad had already resolved to make some adjustments to their minds to avoid variables. Using her arms for support, Verina held herself in a planche while Conrad took her from behind and fired another load within her. She then collapsed. Letting her enjoy her well-deserved rest, Conrad exited to rewire her maids, then returned to sit cross-legged by her side and used the rest of the night to finish the meridian condensation and complete his 5th fleshly transformation. Now, he truly was at the mid-stage of the transcendent rank in both the martial and spiritual paths. On the next morning, Verina awoke in a messy bed with Conrad by her side. Her eyes showed complex feelings. "You're not human," she stated, realizing her mistake. Clearly, Else knew of Conrad's true nature, which is why she didn't prevent her from playing with him, knowing she would end up burning herself. Which she now did. "I am not. However, my empress, does it matter?" If such knowledge befell her 24 hours ago, Verina would not have hesitated to behead Conrad. But now, it appeared it really didn't matter. On the contrary, she felt the necessity to ensure the safety of his secret and back him in his future endeavors. All the things I said yesterday, result of a heated moment, forgotten entirely. Verina nodded. "I'm not that kind of W. I know, just with me. Trust me, others have done and said worse." The two of them remained naked on the soiled bed, and as the smell of their last deeds rose to her nostrils, Verina couldn't help but feel the need to cement their new relationship. However, she restrained herself, having her maid step in to clean their mess. She initially wished to eliminate them and have new ones brought in, but Conrad convinced her that it was not necessary. She concluded that he must have used his demonic powers on them and didn't pursue it. The maids then prepared a bath for the two to clean themselves. "What's your current plan?" "Use the next months to increase my cultivation, take over the harem, take over the empire's noble houses, control its economy, empower my forces, then overthrow the von Jürgen dynasty," Conrad replied. "The church won't allow you." The celestial church decreed that only paragon spirits can rule independent realms. Even if the holy flame church cannot stop you, surely you don't think yourself able to contend with the celestial church. Verina's words brought back the critical issue. Conquering was easy, but ruling difficult. Overthrowing Ulrich would only be the beginning of new problems unless Conrad's strength could suppress the entire world. He knew very well that he was far from that threshold. Moreover, he still didn't have a good understanding of the celestial church's power. Verina sought solutions, and soon, a devious thought flashed within her mind. How about giving me a son? Having him pass as Ulrich's, and when we overthrow him, we help the son onto the throne. I become the dowager, and you rule from the shadows. When your cultivation is high enough to suppress all dangers, we switch the throne back to you. Conrad's eyes widened in stupor. Truly, the scariest persons in imperial palaces were always women. Bold. Let's not discuss that for now. Verina no longer pursued in that direction, lowering her eyes onto Conrad's now flaccid rod that hid beneath the water. Even in that state, its girth remained admirable, and its smell called her. She didn't know when her hand reached toward it and gave it a few pumps. Want a taste? Conrad chortled and stood up, letting his rod rise to action and stand erect before Verina's face. She gulped, relishing in that strange orchid scent, kissed it left and right before licking the underside and pulling it into her mouth. Slurp, slurp, slurp. But as the sucking and slurping carried on, a voice coming straight from Verina's palace entrance boomed and reached their ears. His Majesty, the Holy Emperor arrives. Chapter 154 Love Token. Verina stopped dead in her tracks, almost choking on Conrad's rod while her eyes widened in fright. Meanwhile, hatred flooded Conrad's heart, and his eyes rippled with rage. Now? Of all times, now? You gotta be kidding me. Ulrich, even if your heart is darker than Satan's, you cannot blue ball a man in such a way. Never in 2 lives had Conrad felt so much hatred for a man whose wife he stole. Clearly, Ulrich worked arduously to become his arch-nemesis. Verina pulled her lips off Conrad's cock and leaped onto her feet. Quick, you're too manly and handsome. Use that transformation skill of yours to change your appearance to a more eunuch face. Verina urged and grabbed a nearby towel which she shoved into Conrad's hands. Conrad didn't delay, using his transformation skill to adopt the appearance of one of those pretty men that put women to shame while lowering his height to 175 meters. At lightning speed, he wiped off the humidity on his body, forced his neglected rod back into a flaccid state, and got dressed. Exiting Verina's bathroom, he returned to his eunuch post to welcome the emperor alongside the maids and eunuchs. Greetings, your majesty, they said in unison as they dropped onto their knees to pay their respects to the emperor. Rise. With a wave of his hand, Ulrich used his holy force to lift them back onto their feet, preventing the kneeling. Though his eyes only swept them with a brief glance, they could see the bright smile plastered on his face. Clearly, the emperor was in a good mood. Conrad, who was aware of the recent events, couldn't understand what happened that could give Ulrich in such delight. Shouldn't he still be fuming over Nil's case? Why did he seem so jovial today? The maids and eunuchs formed a line behind the emperor, following him toward the empress' quarters at the entrance of which they formed 2 perfect rows. Without warning, Ulrich pushed the door open and stepped in. Verina had long since returned to lying on her sofa, but when Ulrich barged in unannounced, she yelped in surprise. Your Majesty, how could you just charge in like that? What if I were in some? Verina's voice trailed while her coquettish eyes glanced toward the beaming Ulrich. This was an act she reserved for him over the years, an act meant to lower his awareness and convince him of her desire and affection for him. Ulrich crossed the room with great strides to sit by Verina's side. Oh, my wife, my beloved wife, having not been able to take care of you for those past days, my heart ached. Therefore, I wish to give you a surprise. Ulrich began and pulled out an onyx box which he extended toward Verina. Perplexed, she took it into her hands, opening it to reveal a dazzling golden ring that overflowed with holy force. A mid-grade holy artifact? Stupor filled Verina's eyes as she appraised the golden ring. In the secular world, holy artifacts were rare commodities. Rarer than saints, in fact. Mid-grade holy artifacts were few and far between, all clearly documented and held in the state treasury. This ring was never one of them. Verina's surprise particularly contented Ulrich, who expected such an effect. Seeing her inquisitive eyes rise to him, he burst into laughter. This is both a tribute and a betrothal gift from the Water Kingdom Alliance, asking us to take their eldest Alliance princess as Adelar's princess consort. News that Adelar would soon become the next crown prince had traveled throughout the Holy Continent. And while the circumstances of the change were relatively shameful and alarming, the fact remained that Adelar was about to become heir to the Holy Continent's #1 nation. Better yet, Adelar remained unwed. Naturally, the weaker realms would attempt to use that opportunity to establish good relationships with the Holy Flame Empire. The low-key Adelar had in a flash turned into the most enticing bachelor of the secular world. The Holy Continent was composed of 3 empires and 28 kingdoms. The Water Kingdom Alliance was an agglomeration of 15 kingdoms united to resist the might of the 3 great empires. They desperately sought ways to maintain their independence, expand their forces, and minimize infighting. The Earth Kingdom Alliance comprised the remaining kingdoms and stood in the same shape. To promote unity, the kingdoms would elect one central kingdom within their most powerful and use it as their leader and face in international diplomacy. Its king became the Alliance King, and its princes and princesses, the Alliance Princes and Princesses. Although the kingdom alliances were still a step below the empires, they were forces to be reckoned with and could, in times of instability, threaten the empire's hegemony. However, these weren't times of instability. The 3 empires stood strong, and with news of a future marriage between the prosperous Wind Third Prince and the Holy Flame Empire's only princess, those kingdoms feared a power shift capable of threatening their existence. Thus, the Water Kingdom Alliance wished to use its eldest princess to not only cement peaceful relationships, but also serve its interests in the Holy Flame Empire. The eldest princess was half paragon spirit, half mermaid, a mesmerizing beauty that could trigger 10 Trojan wars. They believed with her looks and wits, she could subdue the unremarkable Adelar and bring them countless benefits. Ulrich, who saw through the ploy, couldn't help but burst into laughter. The fools were bribing him with a state treasure for the sake of sending their eldest princess into a fiery pit. How could he not be delighted? My beloved wife and empress, I have decided to bestow this treasure onto you. What do you think? Looking at the mid-grade holy ring, Verina's mood soured. Unfortunately, Conrad's cultivation was still too low. Otherwise, she could have given him this treasure for his protection. Alas. Oh well, she could always keep it for him and grant it at a later date. Your Majesty should keep it for your Majesty's protection. I can't bear wasting such a treasure. Verina rejected, knowing Ulrich would only renew his efforts. How could this be? Gems should be matched appropriately. Only my empress is deserving of this treasure. Ulrich declared, and not taking no for an answer, placed the ring on Verina's finger. With your Majesty's words, I can wear it at ease. Let this ring be a token of our love, true, pure, and eternal. As Verina spoke, she took a second to admire the ring's craftsmanship and had to admit the refiner did an excellent job. Meanwhile, Ulrich found her words particularly pleasing to the ears. And when one day, that same ring would be used to nail him onto the ground, he would recall this moment and spurt blood. Chapter 155. I prepared him for you. Ulrich could see that the more Verina looked at the ring, the more pleasing she found it. Therefore, it was time to attack the second purpose of his visit. My empress, could you please present me all your eunuchs? At the sound of those words, Verina frowned. She set the ring aside and lowered her gaze back onto Ulrich's still beaming face. What was the meaning of this? Why would Ulrich want her to present all her eunuchs out of the blue? Could it be that Conrad had been exposed? If your Majesty wants me to present my eunuchs, I naturally will. But first, may I ask why? Verina's question was natural. Ulrich had never brought such a request beforehand. And when considering the recent fate of Yvonne's eunuchs, anyone would be full of apprehension. He understood that principle. As you know, imperial eunuchs are the cornerstones of the emperor's guard, the key members of his staff, and closest servants. Unfortunately, although imperial eunuchs are semi-saints trained from the cradle by the imperial family, they're still eunuchs, after all. Noble families might be willing to send some of their less valuable daughters to serve within the palace, hoping they catch my attention, but they would never willingly send their sons to become palace eunuchs. Therefore, the eunuch class is mainly constituted of the children of destitute commoners and human slaves. Ulrich's words were common knowledge within the imperial palace. Thus, Verina merely nodded. But the problem is that most of those have low cultivation talent. Finding hidden gems to train is becoming increasingly challenging. Thus, the quantity of high-ranking eunuchs has been dwindling over the years. Therefore, after several tests, I intend to select a group of young eunuchs, among those currently within the palace, to personally train and promote, hoping that at least one imperial eunuch can emerge from their ranks. Oh! Although she let nothing transpire on her face, inwardly, Verina shivered. By tests, she knew Ulrich meant talent and bloodline tests. For Conrad, both were terrible ideas. If the talent assessing steel showed shocking numbers, Ulrich would kill him. If the bloodline assessment showed any issue, Ulrich would still kill him. And knowing both his unparalleled talent and demonic bloodline, Verina knew that if she couldn't exempt him from the examination, Conrad's life was forfeit. Her lips curled into a smile. Actually, I also have a gift for you. Oh. Ulrich's eyes showed his surprise. Never did he expect that Verina was so considerate that she'd already been preparing something for him. Indeed, the perfect wife. And what would that be? Give me a second to bring it. Verina stood up, stepped outside, and found Conrad among her lining eunuchs. Their eyes met, and she sent him a mental message. We have a situation. You need to change your cultivation to the peak of the true priest rank and follow me in. As the mental message echoed within his mind, Conrad could sense the seriousness within Verina's words. Knowing that she now had his best interest in mind, he didn't delay and used his transformation skill to lower his cultivation to the 9th step true priest rank. Verina took his hand, leading him back into her room where an expectant Ulrich awaited. His eyes fell upon the eunuch Verina had just brought in, but when he analyzed his age and cultivation, his eyes shone with dazzling light. 17 years old, 9th step true priest? Jim. What the imperial family lacked the most was high-level priests. To Ulrich, one was more valuable than 3 knights of the same level. If he could train a new high-level priest, he could obtain one more ace in his sleeve. To say nothing of the fact that this boy's talent surpassed all his previous expectations in potential recruits. Unlike knights that only knew how to destroy, priests were competent in many areas such as healing, refining, enchanting, formation setting, and the likes. But since the church monopolized them, many such jobs had to be handed to them. This had always been a thorn in Ulrich's side, and Verina knew it well. Who might this child be? For the more than 900 years old Ulrich, Conrad was indeed nothing more than a child. He's a human eunuch boy that entered the palace several months ago. I spotted him by chance and recognized his talent. I've been training him ever since, hoping that I could present him to your majesty as a new court eunuch when he broke through the grand priest rank. Verina explained while Conrad made sure to keep his head bowed and not meet Ulrich's eyes. Inner court eunuchs could not be higher than the true knight or priest ranks. When any one of them broke through the grand rank, they had to report to the imperial court's personnel department and be promoted to court eunuchs. He reached the peak of the true priest rank in several months. Indeed, Verina's positive reply made Ulrich unable to contain his elation. He slapped his thigh and stood up with a brash laugh. Ha 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 ha, would that can be carved? Good, very good. Ulrich's reaction eased Verina's heart, and she pushed Conrad forward. He stopped before the emperor, still keeping his head lowered as a show of deference. Boy, what's your name? Conrad, your majesty." Conrad stammered, pretending to look awed by the emperor's presence. Ulrich liked his reaction. Only with a balanced mixture of talent and submissiveness could he breed perfection. "Conrad? Good name. Little Conrad. From now on, you can forget about your life as an inner court eunuch. Effective immediately, you become one of my personal attendants. Raise your head." "Thank you, your majesty, for your grace." Conrad trembled and expressed his gratitude while raising his head to face Ulrich's silver eyes. Seeing that effeminate face that showed no trace of masculine might, Ulrich was satisfied. The boy was more and more pleasing to the eyes. He then had a fantastic idea that would forever bind Conrad to him, an idea that flabbergasted even Verena. "Moreover, I take you as my adopted son and bestow upon you the imperial surname. From now on, you are Conrad von Jürgen, the Holy Flame Emperor's 9th son. Though you might not be a prince and carry Paragon spirit blood, you shall still be recognized as a von Jürgen scion. I hope that in the future, you can become a holy priest capable of defending the imperial family's dignity and interests against the world if need be." Both Conrad's and Verena's eyes widened in incomparable stupor. Shocked and frightened by Ulrich's words, they didn't know what to do or say. "Your Majesty, perhaps this is a bit excessive?" Verena stammered, taken off guard by this outrageous move. Had Ulrich's insanity broken through a new level? A Paragon spirit emperor, taking a human, eunuch boy as an adoptive son and bestowing the imperial surname onto him? This had never happened in the history of the Holy Continent and would shock the world. Conrad despaired. Ulrich's move was about to push him into a detestable limelight. Not one bit. Talent deserves adequate treatment. It's not because it has never been done before that we cannot do it today. With the talent Conrad displayed, Ulrich was confident in his ability to train a new holy priest in the next few centuries, a holy priest loyal only to him. How could he not bind him in the most secure of ways? With a wave of his hand, he dismissed Verena. "Boy, don't you know what you should be doing?" The shock within Conrad's face was a reaction Ulrich found perfectly normal, and this time, it was no comedy. But things being what they were, Conrad could only abide. With great emotions, he fell onto his knees and proclaimed, "Thank you, adoptive father, for your grace. Good boy. If you cultivate diligently and serve me well, I might even go ask the church for a special regeneration baptism to give you back your lost parts and make you a whole man again." Conrad didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he just cried tears of anguish. "I am not missing anything. What do you want to give me back?" Ulrich believed those were tears of emotions, and so knelt by Conrad's side to lift him up. "Foolish child. Adoptive father hopes you won't disappoint his expectations. Tomorrow, report to the Central Personnel Department to receive your new quarters and tokens, then come to the Emperor's palace." Ulrich theatrically said, then walked out, leaving the still baffled pair behind. Insanity and genius walk side by side. Others might think me mad, but I know myself, a genius. Ulrich whispered as he stepped out of Verena's quarters to return to his palace. Chapter 156 Drops of Heaven. Once Ulrich was out of sight, Conrad's gaze fell back onto Verena. "Care to explain what just happened?" "I was taken by surprise. I didn't know Ulrich intended to recruit new talents from the inner court eunuchs. With your background, the examination could only end in your death. Therefore, I had to come up with this plan to exempt you from it." Verena sighed and shook her head. Conrad already inferred Verena merely intended to hide him in plain sight. However, why did things turn out the way they did? This I can understand, but why adopted son? If you ask me, who do I ask? My best guess is that he takes you as an easily swayed boy of low background. He hopes that through this unprecedented move, he can ensure your loyalty for a lifetime. Although he doesn't fear this level of talent, it's always best to make sure the plant you foster blossoms into something that solely suits your needs. If across the next decades and centuries, you live the life of a von Jürgen scion, though you might not have been born in the imperial family, it will become your home and roots. The first 17 years of your life will instead turn into a distant, unpalatable memory. Verina's reply pulled a sigh out of Conrad. This sudden change heralded frustrating days. With the means at his disposal and his growing abilities, he had no need for such status. Be it to access the women of the inner court, or to scheme against its leading characters, all were things he could already accomplish with relative ease. But with this new status, he would get shoved into the light, with countless pairs of eyes on him. How could he still come and go freely? The enemy is exposed, unable to trace my moves, whereas I am concealed and grasp all his. This was the precept Conrad had been following until now. Adelar also did the same. But now the two of them were about to leave the shadows. But this was only the first problem. The second one was much more dreadful. Main quest, level 5 objectives. 1. Conquer 40 beauties of the grand rank. 2. Obtain a disposable income of 100 million purple crystals. 3. Take full control of 3 mid-level noble houses, or higher. 4. Conquer a noble imperial consort. 5. Obtain the full support of 2 mighty figures, or more, within the inner court. 6. Establish a black market both in the inner court and the Holy Flame City. 7. Achieve all these without letting Conrad's name spread within the Holy Flame City. The 7th part was about to get wrecked. Forget about the Holy Flame City. If only for a moment, my name will soon travel the Holy Continent. I need to finish this quest before Ulrich announces the news. Conrad resolved. Fortunately, with the help of the semi-saint Inquisitress he dispatched to assist him, Wolfgang had already conquered House Hinlein. Thus, only the 6th requirement remained. With a deep breath, Conrad regained his calm. My Empress, I have work to do, and won't be able to play with you any further. With those words, Conrad turned heels, ready to leave Verina's palace. Be careful of what you do by Ulrich's side. He's as insane as he is cunning and devious. Underestimate him, and you will definitely suffer. Conrad nodded and left for his quarters. There, he had the 2 eunuchs Ralph and Alan give him a detailed report of the ongoing black market activities. Hans has been doing well with the initial setup. However, we are meeting resistance from some old eunuchs of the auction department. The auction department had always been in charge of the inner court's commerce. Hans himself came from there. How could they look on as someone took over their monopoly of the inner courts market? Therefore, they'd been vigorously battling Hans in the establishment of this new force, going as far as manipulating auctions and lowering the prices of many shops to impossible levels to prevent Hans' sales. If it were before, Conrad would instead use time and methods to slowly deal with them. But now, time was of the essence. That is not an issue. All the opposing head eunuchs of the auction department will die by tonight. Meanwhile, how is the refinement of the drops of heaven going? The simplicity with which Conrad sentenced his competitors to death made the 2 eunuchs tremble. But since they'd boarded that ship of benefit, they would never look back. Moreover, they had absolute faith that all Conrad did possessed the backing of the harem's mighty figures. That being the case, within the inner court, whoever offended him was doomed to destruction. He was the true eunuch lord of the inner court. The first batch is complete. Hans will launch the first sales tonight. Good. This drug is imperative in laying down our foundation and taking over the inner court's wealth and souls. No mistake is tolerated. Drops of Heaven were archrank pills that drastically boosted the cultivation speed of those beneath the archrank, and even helped those at the true rank and below break through a few levels. Better yet, they produced a soul-consuming euphoria that allowed the consumer to see all his dreams fulfilled in mirages. And following the mirages, the mind's alertness increased by several folds while productivity skyrocketed. Alas, they also produced dreadful addiction. Take one today, and you couldn't resist gulping another tomorrow. While consuming them, there was no problem whatsoever. But once the consumer stopped, the chest ached, the mind burned, and the nights were full of horrid nightmares. Conrad obtained the recipe from the system and dispatched 2 copies, one to Hans and the other to Wolfgang. Wolfgang was naturally faster and had already begun selling them through their black market chamber of commerce, building a loyal fan base. However, he faced other difficulties. When all the difficulties were removed and their black markets firmly established, the quest would be completed. Conrad closed his eyes, contacting Wolfgang, who was currently facing a dilemma. "Father-in-law, how are the sales going?" A deep sigh escaped Wolfgang's lips as Conrad's words echoed within his mind. "Huh, boss. The situation went from bad to worse. As you know, there is already an established black market within the city's undergrounds. At first, I believed that although they would prove a challenge, they couldn't resist us for long. Only now do I realize how wrong I am. Their backer is from the palace and their foundation profound." Conrad's face contorted into a frown. "Do you have any idea on who that might be?" "Yesterday, I snuck into their headquarters to glean information. Imagine my surprise when I saw their leader entertaining the third prince like a servant would his master." "Lorenz von Jürgen? Impossible. Where does that trivial prince get the funds?" It wasn't that Conrad looked down on the third prince. There was just nothing to look up to. His cultivation was at the peak of the transcendent knight rank, and his resources shallow. Calling him an idle prince wasn't an exaggeration. Where did the likes of him get the means to control the Holy Flame City's black market? Either the world had severely underestimated him, or there was someone else at his back. I also don't think him to be the true leader. However, only a high-ranking member of House von Jürgen could use a prince as front for his operations. Besides the emperor himself, who can it be? The eldest prince? The second prince? Some hidden elder? Conrad's mind revolved around the thought, but he couldn't come up with a solid conclusion. That person should be the one that attempted to send you to your doom through Nils. Therefore, it can neither be Ulrich nor Elmar. I will personally handle Lorenz and find out who hides behind him." Conrad pledged. "Is the black market leader male or female? Mid-level semi-saint female? Then that's simpler. No need to destroy. I will dispatch my familiar to help you take control of them. By tomorrow, we must have the black market in our hands." "Yes, boss." Conrad gave the two eunuchs a set of bells that allowed them to mentally contact him from a distance as long as he possessed their counterparts on him. He then dismissed them and summoned both Kron and Margot. "Greetings, master." They hailed in tandem. "Kron, I have a few odd jobs for you. First, you will swallow all the head eunuchs of the auction department that oppose our black market establishment. Then, you will use your powers to dominate the mind of the Holy Flame City black market leader, bring her to our side, and have her speed up the spread of our products. The addiction must spread fast so that we can use the drops of heaven to control all the commoners and low-level nobles in the Holy Flame City. As for you, Margot." Conrad condensed a phantasm orchid which floated into Margot's hands. "Return to House Kriegel and convince your nephew, the Kriegel Duke, to swallow this flower through any means possible. Once he does, I will be able to take control of his mind and take over House Kriegel by proxy. Kron will help you leave the palace without getting detected." Margot nodded. Then, alongside Kron, she vanished from Conrad's sight. Conrad stepped into his cultivation chambers within the space mansion and sat cross-legged to cultivate. It was time to unlock the third and final layer of the 100-flower scripture and obtain its nature attribute. As he rotated the 100-flower scripture, rose petals danced around him, alongside dazzling light and crackling lightning. The rose petals then turned into purple vines that spread across the rooms, while peach blossoms appeared by his side. The final layer of the 100-flower scripture was now his. Conrad didn't stand up, staying in meditation to familiarize himself with those new abilities while solidifying his foundation. 5 days of closed-door cultivation carried on in such a way, but on the outside, only 12 hours passed. As the 5th day reached its end, Conrad's eyes opened, and at the same time, a succession of voices echoed within his mind. "Boss, following the sudden disappearance of its leaders, the auction department has not only surrendered but decided to vigorously promote our efforts. The drops of heaven were a resounding success. Hundreds of inner court eunuchs and maids have already fallen prey to them, swindled by the promises of fast cultivation improvement. Hans estimated that in the following week, thousands will fall. Boss, your man's methods are truly extraordinary. The black market leader just knocked on my doorsteps to offer her allegiance and services. Henceforth, the holy flame city's undergrounds shall be ours. She'll also facilitate the sales of the drops of heaven within the low nobility. Master, I used the lives of my nephew's children to coerce him into swallowing the flower. The task is completed. Conrad's lips curled into a devilish smile. Good, you've all done well. There will be plentiful rewards. At that time, the system's voice sprang within Conrad's ears. Host, congratulations on completing the 5th quest. Reward time. Chapter 157 Perfect Polygamy AR. Promotion to Harem Grandmaster. Free physique upgrade. Choice between harem tolerance programming and perfect polygamy art. Conrad used the physique upgrade to directly improve his holy primal physique to the divine rank before returning his attention onto the choices before him. It brought him no difficulty. The harem tolerance programming would allow its user to rewire the harem ring wielder's tolerance regarding other harem members, and in a nutshell, made him able to control their thoughts on the Conrad sharing topic. A skill he had no use for. Not only could he use his own demonic powers to accomplish this if he so wished, but he also had no interest in an ability that would turn his lively harem into a dull den of kneeling puppies. As for the other one, its description made Conrad's eyes shine with depraved light. If I could kiss you, I would, Conrad stated while looking at the perfect polygamy art. Perfect polygamy art. For every harem member wearing a harem ring, the host can create one harem clone. Harem clones have no cultivation base, but can use all of the host's pleasure skills regardless of origin and farm EXP. The host also shares in their experiences and can see through their eyes or take over their bodies if he so wishes. Conrad naturally chose the perfect polygamy art. Not only did it lessen the burden of EXP farming, but it would keep the beauties occupied while he battled for supremacy. But then, a critical thought flashed within his mind, forcing his face to contort into a frown. But then, will I be getting cucked by myself? The thought is both strange and disturbing. The existential question of whether Conrad would cuck Conrad swirled within our protagonist's mind as he stood up and exited his quarters. Clang, clang, clang. Meanwhile, within a training room set up for drills, Yvonne's pure self trained Conrad's harem in the battle arts. Jasmine, Ileana, Daphne, and Freya circled and shot at Yvonne while trying to find openings in her flawless guard. Too weak, too slow, predictable, wide open. One after the other, Yvonne sent them flying against nearby walls while the remaining harem members observed the scene with apprehension, knowing their turn would soon arrive. At that time, Conrad stepped in, and instantaneously, all eyes fell on him. Daphne's, in particular, rippled with the light a kidnapped princess witnessing the arrival of her handsome savior. Ah, Daddy Conrad, please save me. She screamed and threw herself into Conrad's arms. Knowing that Daphne majored in excessive performances, Conrad felt no surprise and merely pat her head. Okay, what's wrong? Sniff, sniff. Yvonne is about to bully me to death. You cannot let this injustice happen. Otherwise, in the future, where will you find such a good, willing, Lamia daughter skilled in the degradation of men? Daphne sobbed on Conrad's chest, causing dark lines to form on his forehead. Yvonne's eyebrows arched upward. She was still getting accustomed to the various harem members and didn't expect such words to escape Daphne's lips. Her aside, no one found those words disturbing. As head consort, Yvonne is in charge of the harem. Why did I give her the title if I didn't intend to let her handle your lot? Today, no one can save you. Yvonne made a grasping motion and Daphne flew toward her side. New, how could you do this to me? Conrad, all those years I've loved you in vain. All those years? They hadn't even spent 3 months together. Why was there talk of years of love? Truly, Daphne's shamelessness was an incurable disease. Hum. I see that you've all been working hard. I'm here to give you all rewards. Conrad waved his hands, causing Margot to appear before him. Naturally, the ladies knew Margot wasn't the reward. Clearly, she'd been brought back to share in it. She stood by Conrad's side in silence. Meanwhile, the ladies wondered what kind of reward Conrad could possibly have in mind. Cultivation treasures, pills, new arts, and spells? Even pure self-Yvonne found her interest piqued. Conrad stretched out his hands, causing purple clouds to appear in the dozens, and morph into 48 perfect replicas of himself. The 48 Conrad clones landed on the ground, surrounding the true self while keeping their hands crossed beneath their backs. Clearly, they were not illusions, but creatures of flesh and blood. Yvonne's eyes showcased her confusion. "What is this?" she asked as she swept the Conrads with her hand. All the other harem ladies trembled, excitement filling them body and soul. What was this? A wet dream made a reality. 48 Conrad had just appeared out of the blue, clouding their vision with his otherworldly presence and triggering a plethora of fantasies within their minds. Some couldn't restrain the eagerness for action from flashing within their lovely eyes. This is their reward. Conrads galore. Each will now have her Conrad to spend time with while I'm away. Those words sent the ladies into an uproar. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets as their bodies shivered in unprecedented excitement. For real? Jasmine couldn't help but ask, the knowledge that she would soon have her own private Conrad, almost making her mind collapse from joy. The same mindset existed in most of the ladies except Yvonne, who found the situation mildly disturbing. For real? Conrad reasserted with a head nod. Husband, thank you for your grace. Those 6 words simultaneously exploded from the 48 ladies, giving the impression that they all shared the same mind. And perhaps at this very moment, they did. Conrad didn't recall giving any of them the permission to call him husband, though he couldn't say it didn't sound pleasing to the ears. The sight of 48 breathtaking ladies calling him husband raised no complaints from his corrupted mind. Meanwhile, Yvonne looked at him with a playful gaze that seemed to be saying, "What about me?" "Not you. Anyone, but you." Conrad replied to the silent question before pulling Yvonne's pure self by the hand and dragging her out of the training room. "Oh, may I ask why?" Yvonne asked, anticipating the answer as they crossed the corridor. "Pure self or not, you can only have the real me. I can't bear sharing you with myself." Conrad believed his words reasonable, but as he turned toward Yvonne, he found she'd been staring at him with a peculiar look. Cute. Yvonne didn't expect Conrad to have such an endearing side of him, and soon her lips curled into a delightful smile. "But worry not, for I only want the real you." Chapter 158, Introduced to the Imperial Family. Following a night of dual cultivation with Yvonne's pure self, Conrad used the bulk of his EXP to promote his 2 weaker physiques to the awakened holy rank, giving him 2 awakened divine physiques and 2 awaked holy physiques. Meanwhile, although it had yet to break through, his cultivation made great strides to the 6th step of the transcendent rank. As dawn reared its head, Conrad left the space mansion, returning to the inner court to prepare himself for his meeting with his cheap adoptive father. The Central Personnel Department was located outside the inner court, between the Department of Justice and the Department of Rights. Being unfamiliar with what lied beyond the inner court, Conrad had some difficulty finding the right teleportation circles to get there as soon as possible. Fortunately, finding maps to that purpose wasn't that complicated. Thus, following a succession of teleportation circles, Conrad arrived before the Central Personnel Department. A towering 6-floor tall building that stretched across 200 meters, the Central Personnel Department assigned the positions, tokens, and quarters of all court eunuchs and above. It also stored copies of the background information of all Imperial Palace personnel, be they Imperial guards, eunuchs, or palace maids. At the same time, the Inner Court's Personnel Department fed it regular information. It was also in charge of receiving the new palace recruits and have them lodged while they received their initial training and were screened for positions. Then it would transfer them to their new jobs. Without hesitation, Conrad stepped in and wasn't surprised to see the legions of orderly eunuchs coming and going as they headed toward their respective tasks. Following one of the many waiting lines, he reached the reception where a team of court eunuchs received tokens and handled court transfers. Present your token and wait on the side for someone to introduce you to your new duties and give you the insignias of your new function. When he saw his head eunuch clothes, the court eunuch believed that Conrad was nothing more than a newly promoted court eunuch here to complete his transfer process. Therefore, he didn't pay him much respect. After all, it was no exaggeration to say that he saw dozens of such people daily. Conrad didn't care, presented his token, and moved to the side. But when the eunuch inserted it into the adjacent identity reading Steele, his eyes widened from fright. Name, Conrad. Age, 17. Race, human. Position, member of the Empress head eunuch team. Note, impending transfer to the Emperor's palace as a personal attendant. The court eunuch's mind underwent a 180-degree turn. He stood up and leaped toward Conrad, who stood with his hands crossed beneath his chest. When they saw the information that caused the brutal change, his fellow workers followed suit. Ha 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 ha, greetings, my lord. Please forgive our lack of courtesy. Your quarters, robes, and tokens have long since been prepared. Moreover, the Emperor requested that as soon as you obtained your new insignias, we should escort you to his palace. We also took the liberty to prepare several gifts, hoping that in the future, the new lord can take care of us. The sudden change in behavior startled Conrad, but soon, he realized the crux of the issue. Usually, the Emperor's personal attendants were all semi-saint imperial eunuchs, the highest-ranking eunuchs in the inner court. They directly reported to the Emperor and carried out many tasks in his name. Their position in the imperial palace was sky-high, and even the average prince should give them some respect. All lower-ranked palace members, be they eunuchs, maids, or guards, had to refer to them as Lord. They also possessed great wealth, plentiful servants, and personal domains within this gigantic imperial palace. And while he didn't wield the title of imperial eunuch, Conrad was about to obtain treatment and power equal to theirs. But unlike them, his cultivation was reportedly low, his rise due to a sudden show of favor from the Emperor. That information caused many court eunuchs to prepare abundant gifts to curry favor while they still could. Needless to say, Conrad didn't put the gifts of a bunch of grand knights in his eyes. What good thing could they offer him? However, he couldn't show such flaws. At the mention of gifts, a mild laugh escaped his lips. I shall remember your courtesy and put some good words for you when the occasion shows itself. Thank you, my lord. The eunuchs then dropped their duties and the lines of hanging workers to lead Conrad toward his new domain. If they were already this submissive to the personal attendant status, Conrad wondered what their attitude would be when the Emperor's son status was added to the list. By the time they reached his new domain, Conrad was speechless. Do all personal attendants enjoy such privilege? Conrad asked the eunuchs by his side as he stared at the place he would now call home. My lord's conditions are indeed special. This was personally arranged by His Majesty. The eunuch replied in awe. The mansion standing before him stretched across a surface of 400 square meters with a mesmerizing courtyard twice the size. At the entrance lied 2 perfect rows of 30 eunuchs and 30 maids, 60 servants tasked with tending to the mansion and serving Conrad's every need. Conrad frowned, wondering how many spies hid within the lot. But that mattered not, for he would soon bring them all into willing servitude. Welcome, your lordship. The servants proclaimed in unison as Conrad stepped into his new mansion. He didn't waste time in contemplation, changing into his new purple robe before heading toward Ulrich's palace. There, many awaited. Second brother, do you know the reason why Father is gathering us all here? I can't recall such a thing happening before. Lawrence inquired through a mental message as the imperial family gathered in the Emperor's palace hall. Why the impatience, you will soon know. Considering the gathering's scope, this will surely be interesting. Adalar replied while sweeping the standing imperial clansmen with an indifferent gaze. Besides Elmar and Holger, all the princes and their mothers were present. Many of the von Jürgen elders still in activity also stood within the lot. Adalar had to admit that although he let nothing transpire on his face, his interest was piqued. Nils stood by her mother's side, eager to leave. The sounds of footsteps echoed within the hall, and alongside Verena, Ulrich walked in. He bypassed his gathered relatives to sit on his throne with Verena standing at his right. As he swept the crowd through his authoritative gaze, he realized someone missed the call. Where is Else? Oh, I forgot to mention. Elsa's maid sent a message that she was at a critical moment of her cultivation and couldn't attend. Verena whispered into Ulrich's ears. He frowned but didn't probe further. All eyes then turned toward him. I've gathered you all today to introduce a new core member of our family. Ulrich began as the imperial family's inquisitive gazes fell upon him. Conrad, step in. Ulrich's voice boomed, spreading outside the hall to where Conrad awaited. Without delay, he walked into the hall, his appearance drawing the attention of the gathered imperial clansmen. Bypassing them, he stopped at the stair leading to Ulrich's throne and dropped onto his knees. Adoptive father, your son greets you. Ulrich nodded, pleased by the proper show of filial piety. And as Conrad's words caused a wave of confusion within House von Jürgen, Ulrich's voice echoed. Everyone, this is Conrad, my adoptive son and your new relative. From now on, his name becomes Conrad von Jürgen. With the elders present, we shall add him to the imperial family's registry. Moreover, since he cannot bear the title of prince, I bestow upon him the nobility rank of duke. Though he might not hold land, his status shall be equal to that of any prince. Hence, he doesn't need to kneel before any member of the imperial family besides the Holy Empress and me. Silence fell upon the scene, the imperial clansmen failing to process Ulrich's words. Their eyes went between Conrad and Ulrich, wondering if their ears were playing tricks on them. To say nothing of others, even Adelar didn't believe what he heard. Your Majesty, you can't be serious, said the ninth elder upon digesting Ulrich's words and realizing his ears were perfectly fine. His words brought back the awareness of the gathered clansmen, whose eyes rose to meet Ulrich's smiling face. Though they'd yet to move their lips, their gazes spoke the same words. Chapter 159. Please reconsider. Undisturbed by the ninth elder's words, Ulrich briefly studied the reactions of every single one of his clansmen. There was mostly stupor and incomprehension. However, as the reality of his words settled within them, strong rejection brewed. Emperors never jest, Ulrich declared, his resolve evident to all those gathered. Conrad, who remained on his knees, found the situation particularly frustrating. Conrad, rise and come stand on my left. Yes, adoptive father. Without delay, Conrad stood up and crossed the stairs to stand on Ulrich's left. From this height, all the faces came into view, their frustration and rejection self-evident. The ninth elder stepped forward and bowed toward Ulrich. Your Majesty, this is nothing short of outrageous. Let's not even mention the eunuch part and status leap. In what realm does a human boy get adopted in Paragon spirit families? How could such an inferior breed be allowed to share in the imperial family's glory? This is not the barbarian continent. The hierarchy of races doesn't allow such travesty. Please reconsider. Immediately, the 6 other elders standing on the side lined with the ninth elder and bowed toward Ulrich. Your Majesty, please reconsider. As for the consorts and princes, although they found the situation just as outrageous, they couldn't openly reject it. More accurately, they didn't dare. Adelar frowned. Though he possessed a relatively good understanding of his father's erratic moments, he never did anything that endangered the essence of the imperial family's dignity. But if this move were allowed to pass, House von Jürgen would no longer have any face on either the national or international stage. He could tolerate anything except for this. Meanwhile, Nils was the only one who didn't take the whole thing so seriously. Instead, she stared into that eunuch boy's effeminate face, and though he paused with deference by Ulrich's side, for reasons she couldn't understand, she found his eyes disturbing. She frowned but couldn't put her finger on the disturbance's source. What is this reasoning? Because other realms don't dare do it, we shouldn't either? Because it has never been done before, we should avoid it? If our ancestors followed such principles, how could we have this empire? And how could you live off its wealth and resources? Ulrich began, his tone calm but his words aggressive. You look down on his human blood and eunuch state. Good, then may I ask you, my good elders? Your cultivation has been in the holy rank for centuries at the very least. None of you is less than 1,000 years old. Across those years, the country's resources allowed you to cultivate in peace, while the von Jürgen name gave you glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. But may I ask you, in this long existence, besides using state wealth to reach the holy rank, what are your contributions? Ulrich's inquiry took the 7 elders aback, and as they exchanged glances, they didn't know what to reply. The answer is, nothing. You have no contributions. Because the grand treaty between the celestial church and infernal cult forbids the use of semi-saints and above in regular wars, and because of your von Jürgen status, you've never set foot on a battlefield. Allow me to be blunt. Your cultivation only serves as decoration. A pretty digit used to tell the world that House von Jürgen possesses X number of saints. Besides that, you are not doing anything. Any one of my human, imperial eunuchs contributes more to the state in 1 month than you have in more than 1,000 years. Yet you dare look down on them? The nerves. Ulrich's voice exploded alongside a wave of holy force that banged the elders' eardrums and made them stagger. They teetered on several steps before regaining their footing. Yet, they still trembled, this time, from shame. Ulrich's words struck true. Meanwhile, most of the consorts and princes shivered in fright. Through this boy, I'm telling those that make my country run that they're held in high regards, and that opportunity exists for them to reach the summit should they show enough potential. I'm pioneering an era of progress and freeing up more resources for those that can truly bring them to good use. Since this is a family matter as much as a state one, I gave you the courtesy of warning you first and letting you get involved in the decision. But in what world do I require your permission? The 7 elders were suppressed, and in this very moment, Conrad was forced to agree that Ulrich's imperial might was absolute. The 7 elders dropped onto their knees, unwilling to offend Ulrich any further. Your Majesty, please forgive our impudence. But as they knelt, Adelar stepped forward. Father, please appease your anger. Though the elders spoke out of turn, their words hold merit. Adelar bowed by the kneeling elders' side. Ulrich's eyes rose from them, to drop onto Adelar's. Though there was the politeness of a son to his father, his gaze showed no dread. Oh, Adelar, please tell me, where does the merit lie? Adelar straightened his back to stare directly into Ulrich's eyes. First, father, may I ask you where the backbone of an everlasting dynasty lies? Unshakable imperial prestige? Ulrich replied, without hesitation. Right, I agree. Be it through absolute might or the adoration of vassals and courtiers alike, imperial prestige must be unshakable for the dynasty to endure eternity. Unshakable imperial prestige leads to absolute order and inexistent revolt. The neighboring states then look in awe and don't dare rashly attack. But father, you are about to obliterate our imperial prestige in one move. Conrad included, all eyes widened upon hearing Adelar's last words. No one expected that he would use such candor before Ulrich, of all people. Instead, it was Ulrich that showed no surprise. Adelar continued. True, their contributions are many. Be it in the imperial palace or as servants in various corners of the country, their work allows us to live off the state. Not only the human slaves, but the same thing goes for the beast commoners. However, if you brought a beast commoner in today instead of that human boy, I'd still object. Low status aside, if by any misfortune, the son of a duke turned into a eunuch and you attempted to take him in as your adoptive son, I'd still object. Not because I look down on low birth or the castrated state, but because the world looks down on both. If you proceed with this, commoners disrespect us. Nobles disrespect us. The church disrespects us. And all states on the globe no longer take us seriously. Though our armies will still rank first in the secular world, can you honestly guarantee that guided by the belief that the country is ruled by a buffoon, they won't start eyeing our lands? That is the first issue. The dissoluteness of Adler's words terrified all those gathered, and though many of them inwardly agreed, they put greater distance between him and them. The elders on his side were no exception. Nerves beat on Ulrich's temple as he restrained the urge to kill that unfilial son of his. But undaunted, Adler carried on. The second issue is much more direct. When the country's jeers are aimed at us, how many still dare proudly wear the name von Jürgen? If the house's kinsmen and women can no longer bear its name with their back straight, haven't we set foot on the road of decline? The eunuchs are empowered, the imperial family weakened, our prestige thrown into the gutter. Haven't we set foot on the road of destruction? Therefore, you can create him imperial duke. I do not care. You can give him resources and wealth. I do not care. You can give him more training than to any of us. I do not care. But you can by no means name him von Jürgen and call him your son. Conrad could feel Ulrich's rage soar and the thrown arms crack within his hands. Verena, who stood at his right, stared at Adler with unconcealed surprise. Clearly, just like the rest, she'd never expected such developments. In regular days, Adler would have spoken such words in private. But now, he knew that if he didn't take the bull by the horns, he would never get the chance. This was his only opportunity to prevent this disgrace. And what if I insist? Ulrich asked while his fury reached a breaking point. A man's existence comes from his parents. I do not dare take my life without your permission. Therefore, I give you two options. First, you kill me. Second, you demote me to commoner and remove my name from the imperial family's registry. Thus, I would no longer belong to this house, and its shame would have nothing to do with me. If you're not willing to take either road, please reconsider. Chapter 160 Infernal Soul Devouring AR. Bastard, unfilial bastard, do you really think I don't dare kill you? Ulrich rose from his throne, and his holy force erupted alongside his thundering voice to barrel into Adler. His body shook, and he staggered with blood dripping from his lips and eardrums. However, he regained his balance and didn't fall on his knees, keeping an indifferent gaze locked on Ulrich. It is your right to kill. If you wish to do so, then go ahead. Death is nothing. Personal shame is nothing. But the family's dignity can never be harmed. We've already lost so much of our face to Hubert Voigt, and before we can recover from that debacle, you attempt such a thing? This is the throne you obtained from your father and the family that raised you from the cradle. Soiling both in such wanton manner, are you not unfilial? I understand that you wish to train a mighty holy priest bound to our name, but I hope you can see reason where it lies and avoid this needless path. Please reconsider. Adler knew he couldn't challenge Ulrich on cultivation. Therefore, he could only use reason, hoping that his father would cave in. As if kindled by his words, the elders stood up, and while bowing toward Ulrich, reiterated their previous words. Your Majesty, please reconsider. The third and fourth prince then stepped forward to beg the same. The people realized that Ulrich couldn't kill them all. Only by supporting Adler's words could they stop the emperor. The seventh prince still didn't dare step forward while the eighth prince was not present due to a strange, chronic disease he'd been carrying since birth. As for the consorts, they had other considerations. Good, very good. Ulrich naturally understood Adler's reasoning. However, he also had other considerations. In less than a century, the Holy Continent's secular world would not have anyone capable of contending with him. Why did he need to care about the jeers of the plebe when he would soon reign supreme? However, that power would come at the cost of his most talented children and weaken the next generation if appropriate measures were not taken. As per the Celestial Church's decree, Paragon Spirit Kings and Emperors couldn't rule for more than 1,000 years. Afterward, they had to join the Church's priests. Ulrich had ruled for less than 400 years and was still far from the deadline. But when the time came for him to join the Celestial Church, who would protect his empire? Ulrich had no confidence in being able to resist the Celestial Church's will in 6 centuries. Forget about 6, even in 1,000 years, he would still not have the strength. It was a dreadful force with the weakest elders being at the divine rank. Therefore, when the time came to leave, he would oblige, at least until his strength was enough to suppress the church and return to his lands. But in the meantime, he needed someone reliable to defend his realm while his cultivation rose. A new son, competent and loyal enough to protect the state and a series of puppet emperors until he returned. Someone who could and would never eye his throne. Conrad was the choice, the son he would raise for the empire's sake. Only by giving him his name and raising him as his flesh across centuries could he ensure that their interests aligned throughout eternity. How could they understand his plight? Well, I'm determined to be willful. If you're dissatisfied, you can head to the Department of Justice to sue me. Though, since they work for me, I'm not sure they will take your complaints. You could also submit an impeachment petition. A shame that I'm the one that processes those and will certainly not impeach myself. Adelar included, the imperial clansman's eyes widened in disbelief. Since when did the emperor become so shameless? What, dissatisfied? A pity that I'm the emperor and you, the servants. Ulrich roared while indexing every single member of the opposition. From this day onward, Conrad shall be known as my ninth son, and a von Jürgen scion. If anyone wants to laugh, I will tear off their tongues. If anyone complains, I will cut off their heads. Whoever feels like this is too much of a loss of face and can no longer keep his back straight is free to come and see me. I will make sure his back will never curve in a lifetime. The other states don't take us seriously anymore. No problem, I will dispatch armies and take their lands. See if they still dare sneer at us. Joke. For 100,000 years, the Holy Flame Empire has been this continent's #1 secular force. Its power unmatched. Were it not for the various branches of the Celestial Church that limited the scope of the continent's internal wars, we would have long since unified it. That is why only we can use the word holy. And I am this proud nation's sovereign. Who dares disrespect my will? If I can't kill him today, I will kill him tomorrow. And if I want a dog to become chancellor, then that dog can lead the state. If you have nothing else to say, get out of my sight. Ulrich waved his golden sleeves, causing a new wave of holy force to erupt and throw all his bowing sons and elders out of the hall. Eorg. They crashed in the outside, their state unknown. Preposterous. Does anyone have more to add to this debate? The consorts and the remaining prince trembled, while Nils suppressed her rising laughter from erupting. Meanwhile, Conrad and Verena exchanged glances that said the same. He's stark raving mad. Nothing? Good. Then you're all dismissed. The Imperial Duke and I have things to discuss. As if freed from a death sentence, they stormed out, faster than their shadows, leaving only Verena, Nils, Ulrich, and Conrad. Nils cast a last glance at his eyes before taking her leave, and Verena soon followed suit. Little Conrad, do you see all I have to endure for your sake? I hope you won't disappoint me. Ulrich exhaled with a deep sigh. Adoptive father, I will never forget this day and the kindness you've shown me. Henceforth, I swear to exert all my strength to execute your will and protect what you cherish. Conrad gave a solemn pledge with a dramatic fall on his knees. Good son, good son. Ulrich repeated while helping him up, and both sobbed in a profound show of emotions. I believe the cultivation method you received from Verena should be top-notch. Therefore, changing is of no use, and in any case, such things often bring more harm than good. However, I will impart a unique art onto you. This art will allow you to magnify the power of your soul. It has 3 layers. Comprehend the first, and your soul will become 10 times more robust and powerful than those of the same rank. Moreover, it can help you refine the souls of others and swallow their soul force to increase your cultivation at breakneck speed without harming your foundation. Ulrich explained while eyeing Conrad's reaction at the mention of refining souls. At first, there was surprise, but quickly, they showed submission. Meanwhile, his heart skipped a beat. Those were good reactions that could be adjusted as needed. I shall follow adoptive father's arrangements. Good. Don't worry, the souls you will receive are that of death row convicts and criminals of the worst kind. No innocent will be sacrificed. Understood, adoptive father. But inwardly, Conrad was perplexed. Refining souls? This was true demonism. Such an art could only stem from Ulrich's infernal souls. And indeed, when the mnemonics flew from his mind to his, they carried with them great surprise. The infernal soul-devouring art, a divine rank art with 3 layers, each making the soul 10 times stronger and more resilient. Meanwhile, comprehending the first layer allows the flawless refinement of any soul regardless of origin. Inventor, Urzel, Western King of Hell. The system's information regarding the art appeared within Conrad's mind. With his talent, Ulrich had only managed to comprehend the first layer and could never master the second one in a lifetime. It wasn't a question of time and dedication. His talent was just insufficient. Therefore, he didn't expect Conrad to do much better. A pity that talent-wise they didn't play in the same league. Chapter 161 Wrong Words. I don't expect you to master the first layer anytime soon. In the meantime, I will be preparing the criminals for you to refine. I believe that with your talent, 1 to 2 weeks should be enough. However, I must warn you, even if you manage to master the first layer in less than 2 weeks, you might not be able to reach the second one in a lifetime. So, don't be discouraged by failure. Ulrich instructed with the stance of a doting elder. Moreover, I will send you resources on a weekly basis to help in your cultivation. You should soon reach the Grand Priest rank so that I can bestow better resources and some artifacts onto you. Conrad's eyes shone at the mention of weekly resources, as if the gate of heaven was opening to him. Ulrich relished in the reaction, confident that the boy couldn't escape his palm. Adoptive father, I will definitely break through to the Grand Priest rank in less than a week. Ulrich nodded, believing that a few days should be enough for a breakthrough. Meanwhile, he summoned an imperial eunuch to spread his decree and Conrad's new status. From now on, besides cultivation, your duties include serving by my side. This is also an opportunity for you to learn about state affairs and the inner workings of the court. In the future, you must shoulder some of my burdens. The way Ulrich exclaimed such words while tapping Conrad's shoulders would make the onlooker believe he truly was his biological son, a prince being raised for governance. And knowing that he would use Ulrich's resources and training to empower himself while screwing his women on the side, Conrad almost felt bad. Adoptive father, if you allow me, I will now take my leave. Of course, you should go explore your new art. By the way, your new status entitles you to a few privileges and tokens I will have delivered to your mansion. Members of the imperial family are the only ones entitled to wear gold. However, since we can't have you wear the same clothing as princes, for obvious reasons, I devised a special robe for you. A black robe embroidered with a golden winged serpent. Besides that, you will also have golden boots and a jeweled crown to serve as your proof of status. Those items are high-grade semi-holy artifacts. Unfortunately, because your cultivation is too low, you can only wear them as decoration. It seemed Ulrich majored in making people speechless. Conrad's eyes showed his astonishment at the mention of so many treasures being bestowed onto him. Although he preferred relying on his cultivation to suppress his enemies, he didn't say no to a few artifacts to bolster his strength. Unbeknown to him, Ulrich was sharpening the sword that would one day drop on his neck. Ulrich believed the shock written on Conrad's face was due to the sudden mention of semi-holy artifacts, goods that he could probably not even dream of beforehand. Satisfied, he stroked his chin, with a "this is nothing to me" look on his face. Now go. I hope you will not prove my care for you misguided. With Ulrich's blessing, Conrad bowed and took his leave. But on the outside, someone awaited. Nils stood at the bottom of the stairs, leading to Ulrich's palace hall with her eyes locked on the entrance, awaiting Conrad's exit. Seeing those eyes that clearly showed she'd been waiting for him, Conrad frowned and went down the stairs. Before he could pass her by, Nils' voice echoed. I only wanted to warn you. Don't get confused by father's deeds. He's not helping you. He's harming you. Realizing that she was merely doing her goody-two-shoes duty to warn him of the imperial family's dangers in good faith, Conrad lowered his guard. I don't understand the meaning of the princess words. Nils shook her head, wondering why she was bothering in the first place. Didn't you see the opposition within the throne room? Not one person there approved of father's decision. All of them see it as the imperial family's disgrace. Adelar, who usually speaks very little even when as far as challenging father's wisdom. Matter of fact, he indirectly called him an unreasonable buffoon. That being the case, how can he tolerate you? To say nothing of him, past today, you will become the imperial family's most loathed member. They will all want your head on a spike, and the situation will only worsen as time passes. If even I can see this, don't tell me you can't. Or do you think you can rely on father's protection? He can protect you during the day, but can he protect you at night? Nils turned to face Conrad, staring into those disturbing eyes of his as she carried on. To say nothing of the fact that you will start using up resources they believe belong to them. They will use any means from framing to murder in order to dispose of you. Therefore, if you cherish your life, you should give up that new position on your own accord. Beg father to stop this while he still can. Otherwise, you're doomed to destruction. As Nils' words ended, Conrad's lips curled into a smile. Thank you, Princess, for your warnings, but what His Majesty commands, I dare not reject. Your Highness can afford to do so because you are His Majesty's treasure. However, my status is low. Before fearing the reactions of others, I should first fear His Majesty's. Therefore, I cannot follow your advice. Nils' face contorted into a frown. Though Conrad's words sounded reasonable, it seemed to her that those were mere excuses. Wasn't the danger of becoming public enemy number one of House von Jürgen, within the imperial palace, enough for him to beg for salvation? Again, she shook her head. It is your life. Do with it as you please. However, the cloud of the secluded elders is not what you can imagine, and they're all stuck-up aristocrats who care about face more than life. Fearing father's discontent is right, but he has use for you while they don't. The difference is clear, and what you should do, clearer. Unless you have ulterior motives, of course. With that said, Nils turned heels, ready to return to her quarters. In any case, she'd said more than she needed to. If that guy had some hidden agenda, saying more was useless. How could that be? My intentions are pure. I only wish to serve His Majesty to the best of my abilities. Conrad replied, and turned his back toward her to head back to his mansion. However, he didn't expect that his casual words would provoke a violent reaction within Nils, who stopped dead in her tracks, her body trembling, and her eyes wide open. Chapter 162, Demanding Main Case. What did you just say? Conrad's eyes flashed with annoyance. Did cultivators also have audition problems? I wish to serve His Majesty to the best of my abilities. No, before that. Oh, my intentions are pure. Conrad waved Nils goodbye with the back of his left hand before taking his leave. But then, an unexpected event occurred. Nils summoned her energy sword and hacked it at Conrad's neck. He was startled. The blow was fast, but not fast enough for him to avoid. However, doing so would expose his cultivation. Therefore, he stood still. Gambling on Nils' character and a probe, he let the sword reach his neck. It stopped right before the blade could touch his flesh. Why didn't you dodge it? Nils asked while keeping her sword aligned with Conrad's neck. Your Highness must be jesting. How could I, with my peak true priest cultivation, dodge your sword? If you want to kill me, I cannot resist. Nils' frown deepened. The sword vanished, and she grabbed Conrad by the shoulder, forcing him to face her. She stared deep into those eyes of his. The shape wasn't something she recalled. However, the expression echoed with her mind to bring back the image of a green-haired, nature serpent youth. She imagined his illusory face standing next to Conrad's and superimposed them to look for the similarities in their gazes. My intentions are pure. In her short life, Nils had only heard that statement twice, both from Anselm's lips. How coincidental that this troubling Conrad now spoke the same. Were they somehow related? Thinking of that possibility, excitement filled her chest. But then she recalled Anselm's fate, and it all died down. My apologies. I was muddled for 1 second. She let go of Conrad's shoulders, and with sorrowful eyes, turned heels and left. How could a dead person reappear in someone else? Have I become so pathetic that I seek the dead in complete strangers? Wake up, Nils. Seeing the lonely back she left behind, Conrad sighed. Where was the flaw? How did she get doubts? Is it what I said? Troubling. In the future, I should be more careful. Conrad naturally didn't memorize everything he'd told Nils on the day they first met. His feelings just didn't have that depth. Upon returning to his palace, he locked himself in his room and activated the system to check his new quest. Main quest, level 6. Description: Congratulations, Harem Grandmaster. A solid foundation is established. Thus, it is now time to expand the host's reach within the empire to stand below one and above the rest. Level 6 objectives. 1. Conquer 120 beauties of the arch rank or above. 2. Take control of the imperial harem in its entirety. 3. Take control of the low and mid-level nobility while subduing at least 30% of the high nobility houses. 4. Control more than 50% of the empire's economy. Main rewards: Harem Lord rank, 2 extra physique slots, bloodline upgrade, if applicable, new system functions. Ability rewards: Valkyrie Mark, Valkyrie Surge. Time frame: 3 years. Seeing the list of things to accomplish, Conrad was undisturbed. He now had a rough understanding of the system's objective picking methods and roughly anticipated them. Still, he had to admit that to anyone else, this would be completely unreasonable. Besides someone with his unique skill set who could complete such a task in 3 years. The first objective is already completed. I should anticipate on future requirements. As for the rest, with my current status, this will become a bit more difficult. I need to find an opportunity to make use of the impending inner court banquet in order to conquer all the core harem members in one night. Conrad left the system to return to the infernal soul-devouring art bestowed by Ulrich. The mnemonic swirled within his mind as he analyzed this demonic art to comprehend the first layer. And as he probed deeper, a faint black mist appeared out of thin air to swirl around him. Meanwhile, while his eunuchs announced Conrad's new position and delivered his gifts, Ulrich left his palace to head toward Elsa's. Naturally, no one dared stop him at the gate. As the eunuch guards announced his arrival, his steps never stopped. In a flash, he reached Elsa's chambers where she sat cross-legged in silent cultivation. Sensing his presence, she stopped. Ulrich, why hide behind the door? Come on in. If anyone heard those words, they would have trembled in fright. Even Verena didn't dare call Ulrich by name, always referring to him as Your Majesty. However, Else clearly didn't have such constraints. The door opened, revealing Ulrich, whose eyes didn't hide his displeasure. Else, why did you not attend the meeting? Clearly, Else calling him by his name didn't bother him in the slightest. Instead, it was her absence that triggered his discontent. Still, though his face wore a frown, his tone remained mild. A purposeless farce. Why do I need to attend? You already told me you planned to make that eunuch boy your son and anticipated opposition. You also told me how you would handle it. I knew exactly what would happen before it did. That being the case, why bother joining the charade? You know the things I hate the most are noise and wasted time. Else replied with a candor that didn't contain the deference of subject to monarch. Between them, there seemed to be very little decorum. Ulrich shook his head and sat by her side. Little girl, in private I can accommodate your willfulness, but on official occasions, you should give me some face. If you keep behaving like this, are you not telling the world that I'm suppressed under your skirt? Where does that put my imperial dignity? Or is it that you're still blaming me for not letting you attend your mother's funerals? Ulrich asked in a helpless tone that carried none of his usual force. It almost looked like he was trying to reason with his little sister. At the mention of her mother's funerals, Else scowled. Since she didn't wear her mask, Ulrich could clearly see her displeasure, and he knew he hit the mark. The realization caused a sigh to escape his lips. On this matter, you can't blame me. The last time you returned to House Metz, you almost died from the church's assassins and disappeared for a decade. Clearly, They will be waiting for you to exit the palace again to carry out another assassination attempt. House Metz's foundation is indeed profound. But what was last time's result? Your mother died. Your father was gravely injured, and many of your house servants perished to shelter you. Were it not for your ancestors coming out of seclusion to repel the assassins, the result would have been 10 times worse. To this day, you refuse to tell me how you spent the last decade. I cannot inquire, but you can't blame me for taking extra precautions. On his deathbed, I promised your brother that I would take care of you. Should you perish under my watch, how do I face his soul in heaven? Ulrich's words worsened Elsa's scowl, and in frustration, she clenched her thigh. Chapter 163, Mastering the First Layer. The Holy Flame Church and House Metz had been waging a silent war since the latter's arrival in the Holy Flame Empire. That was no secret. However, following the exposure of Elsa's cultivation talent, that war escalated. According to the head exarch's assessment, she had the makings to reach the cross-tribulation saint rank in 1,000 years. The church was determined to eliminate the source of future trouble and not allow Else to grow into another Hubert Voigt. Unfortunately for them, the Metz were no pushover. As long as they didn't throw pretense into the gutter to break into all-out war, eliminating them was impossible. And without a righteous cause, they could only result to silent assassinations and shadow warfare. After all, be it the von Jürgen, the Kvass, or the Voigt, none would look idle as the church destroyed one of the houses that helped balance the empire. Elsa's brother was the first casualty of their strengthened assassination attempts. He was also Ulrich's sworn brother. On his deathbed, Ulrich pledged to treat his sister as his own and protect her from harm till his dying breath. Initially, as his long-standing sworn brother, he was Ulrich's choice for brotherly love extermination, but following his loss, Else took his place. For that reason, in agreement with her father, the Metz sovereign prince, he took her into the palace, with the excuse of making her his holy consort, and had been caring for her ever since. She discovered that truth from her savior's lips, the dreadful woman to whom she owed her life. Now all words of care grated her ears, making her feel like a pig being fattened for slaughter. And thinking of that dreadful woman, she couldn't help but pity the boy that had to call her mother. The dark mist swirling around Conrad thickened, blowing into a pitch-black fog as he comprehended the first layer of the infernal soul-devouring art. 3 hours of silent cultivation passed before his mind shone with enlightenment, and he mastered the first layer. The pitch-black fog soared toward the middle of his forehead and vanished within, spreading through his mind to merge with his soul. As it spread, Conrad could feel the quality of his soul power rising at breakneck speed. In a flash, it became 10 times more potent and 10 times more resilient than it was beforehand. With Conrad already possessing an imperial avatar, his soul power was extraordinary. Now, however, it was surpassing the mortal realm's transcendent rank limitations. And this was only the first layer. Conrad wondered what level of soul power he would reach by the time he comprehended the third. Perhaps he could now disable the average first-step semi-holy knight with a casual spiritual attack. Meanwhile, his fourth circle spells could most likely rival others' fifth circle spells. Seeing such benefits, Conrad was eager to carry on with his comprehension of the art. However, he was stopped by the delivery of Ulrich's gifts. "Your Grace, this is this week's quota. His Majesty hopes you'll work assiduously," the leading eunuch said while his subordinates dropped the coffers. "His Majesty doesn't have to worry. I will put 10 times the average man's efforts," Conrad replied before dismissing the delivery team. As they dispersed, Conrad appraised the gifts, and his lips curled into a smile. Those were the best cultivation pills and beverages one could expect at the true and grand priest ranks. Although Conrad had no use for them, some of his weaker harem members probably did. He had the coffers moved to his cultivation chambers and delivered the goods to those that really required them. Silent cultivation then resumed. Hours passed by in a flash, and soon, night descended onto the imperial palace. "It seems mastering the second layer can't be done overnight. I suppose I shouldn't be greedy," Conrad interrupted his cultivation and shifted his attention onto a more pressing matter, the second prince, Adelar. Since his performance in the throne room, Conrad firmly believed that if anyone had the nerves to use the emperor's favorite daughter in a scheme, it would be him. Joke. He only stopped short of calling Ulrich an idiot before the core members of the imperial family. What didn't he dare do? Now the question was, did his wits match his guts? With a wave of his hand, Conrad summoned Kron. "Greetings, master." As per usual, Kron dropped onto his knees and hailed in profound reverence. "I need you to watch over me while I use soul projection to take control of someone's body. Be at ease, master. I won't let anything disturb you." Kron pledged. Conrad nodded and closed his eyes, using his Phantasm Lord abilities to project his soul outside his body and explore the imperial palace. In his soul form, he stood in an ethereal dimension from where he could see everything on several miles, bypass walls, and detect even the carcass of flies crushed beneath carts. Meanwhile, none could detect him. In less than 3 seconds, he located his target, the third prince, Lorenz. Lorenz lied within his bed, still recovering from the shock induced by Ulrich's holy force. Unbeknown to him, Conrad appeared by his side and slipped into his soul. Lorenz saw strange purple fog spread within his mind and battled it with every bit of his soul power. But as a knight, he didn't have much to begin with. To say nothing that now, Conrad's soul power rivaled that of semi-holy priests. The clash was short-lived, and Lorenz's soul surrendered to Conrad's control. With the body now under his full grasp, Conrad browsed through the memories and saw many of the deals between Lorenz and Adelar. The deeds they'd carried out throughout the years impressed even him. The scene of Adelar revealing his understanding of the Cracked case and his plot to exterminate House Cracked naturally appeared. However, even Lorenz didn't have a clear understanding of Adelar's true abilities, and some core zones of his soul were cloaked by formidable wards Conrad couldn't break without destroying him. Something he didn't plan to do at the moment. Meanwhile, he wished to use the opportunity to test Adelar and obtain more information from his lips. Controlling Lorenz's body, Conrad stood up and headed toward Adelar's palace. No one stopped him as he did, and he soon reached the chamber where Adelar rested. Chapter 164, First Confrontation. "Come on in." Before Conrad could announce himself, Adelar's voice came from behind the door. Without delay, Conrad stepped in. Adelar sat before a table with a wine glass within his hand and motioned for Conrad to sit before him. "Are you here to discuss father's move?" he asked while Conrad settled within the chair. "Actually, I have many questions. First, I can't understand why he is so adamant on making that eunuch boy his adoptive son. Even he should know that it can only bring harm and no good. Second, why were you so aggressive in your words? This is not your style. Weren't you afraid that he would kill you in a fit of fury?" Those indeed were Lorenz's questions. Conrad merely used them to set the stage for his information gathering. Adelar lowered his wine glass onto the table to lift his gaze onto Lorenz. "Father is no fool. If he does that knowing full well the damage it will yield, he must have profound reasons. But I'm not sure those are favorable to us. It also doesn't change the fact that the boy is now a stain to the imperial family's prestige. Needless to say, I will have him killed in the following days." Inwardly, Conrad sneered. "As for your second question, I was testing theories. Testing theories with your life? Indeed. Us older princes know that Yvonne Voigt is father's first taboo. Anyone that gets too close doesn't have a good end. If someone tells me that's why Wenzel died, I can believe. But what is his second taboo? His imperial power?" Conrad replied through Lorenz's memories. "Right. His imperial power is, without a shred of doubt, his most valuable possession. Nothing compares to it, and anything that threatens it is put to death. That being the case, why am I still alive? This question has been troubling me for many years. At first, I believed it was due to a mixture between personal bias and the fact I never challenged him in the open. But now, I'm convinced there is something else. I insulted him before 7 elders, his wife, children, and their mothers. So dissolutely stepped on his imperial power, and he just sends me flying? No, anyone could have come out of that room alive except for me. Therefore, I conclude I have a particular use for him. A use that forces him to keep me alive until I serve my purpose. That being the case, I can now be unscrupulous. Adler's lips flashed his usual smile as he maintained eye contact with Conrad. The combination of his words and expression caused discomfort within Conrad's chest. However, he shouldered the gaze. What if your assumptions were wrong and he killed you? Adelar chuckled, and while still staring into Conrad's eyes, raised his glass. To fight for world domination, you first need audacity. Without audacity, what can you achieve? Without audacity, how can you surpass the limitations imposed by birth and lineage to triumph over your enemies? I believe that on the path to becoming supreme, he who cannot gamble his life is unable to achieve anything. Adler's eyes shone with an eerie light that somehow reminded Conrad of Ulrich's gaze at his worst. Have I answered all your questions, Lawrence? The tone caused Conrad's eyes to widen in stupor, but before he could do anything, gray mist burst from Adler's body to surround the two of them. Conrad had seen this mist more than once. Be it Wenzel or Nils, both displayed it with various levels of proficiency. However, in Adler's hands, this paragon's spirit innate ability had reached a terrifying level. The scenery changed, and the two appeared within Lauren's soul where Adelar faced Conrad in his purple fog form. Greetings, adversary, Adelar said with the smile Conrad was starting to find rather irritating. How did you know? Conrad's voice echoed from the purple fog as Adelar eyed him with the interest of a hunter on his chosen prey. Since he became my man, Lawrence has never been able to hold my gaze for more than 5 seconds. You failed that test. He also tries very hard to conceal his fears. In your case, it is difficult to hide something you don't have. You are brazen. I like that. You possess many extraordinary means. I like that even more. How about leaving the shadows and submitting to me? Allow me to make use of your talents, and in the future, you can be below 1 and above billions. Conrad burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. A pity that in this world, no one is qualified to employ me. I will also give you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Forget your dreams of supremacy and submit to me. When I rule the world, you can be the chancellor. Adelar shook his head. A shame that our goals are the same and our beliefs identical. In this world, no one is qualified to employ me. Adelar stretched out his hands, causing the gray spiritual mist to spread within Lauren's mind and assault Conrad's soul. But before he could trap him, the purple fog Conrad vanished in haze, crossing the ethereal dimension to return to his true body. Pooh! Conrad spurt blood and fell face first, alarming Kron, who didn't expect such developments. Ah, master! Kron roared while lifting Conrad's fallen body and injecting his demonic energies into his veins. Chapter 165, The Taste of Grandeur. Kron's demonic energy spread through Conrad's veins, soothing his internal damage before rising to his soul to check possible issues. He was relieved to see that besides some internal damage, Conrad didn't have any injuries. His soul, as robust as ever. Thankfully, the infernal soul-devouring art magnified his soul power to impressive levels. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a simple matter of spitting blood. Conrad raised his hands, stopping Kron's worries. It's nothing. We've gained a lot today, Conrad explained while his lips curled into a contented smile. Kron's eyes showed his incomprehension. Why was it that his master's heart seemed to overflow with happiness? Did he relish in pain? However, as servant, it wasn't appropriate for him to inquire on the master's tendencies. So, he didn't. Instead, he focused on what truly mattered. What are the gains? I'd already inferred that Adelar was our enemy. Confirming it was just a formality. But now, I can roughly guess the source of his powers. To say nothing of us, it's very likely that Ulrich doesn't realize the gravity of his own situation. Conrad explained while wiping off the blood on his lips. First, cultivation. There isn't really much to say on that topic. Ninth step, semi-holy priest, ordinary physique and no martial cultivation whatsoever. However, his spiritual talent is outstanding, and his soul power dreadful, rivaling that of profound saints. In terms of fighting capabilities, Elmar is simply not his match. Those were information Conrad gained from the system while he examined Adelar. As for the origin of that soul power, that's hard to say. But considering the nature of his bloodline, my money is on the Tower of Rebirth. It's likely he obtained the formidable inheritance of a previous celestial church leader and used it as foundation to develop his own abilities. Though his blood is impure, he has surpassed its limitations, bringing his bloodline abilities to a level his pureblood peers can only dream of. And this is where it gets interesting. His spiritual mist can seamlessly dominate the mind of those with inferior soul power. Within the Imperial Palace, how many of the Emperor's men have already fallen to his control? His cultivation speed is fast, and he will soon reach the Holy Priest rank. Even if I didn't appear, it's very likely that before he could refine him, Ulrich would perish. Conrad couldn't understand how Ulrich could be reckless enough to choose Adelar as one of his refinement targets. It didn't make sense. Taking his character into account, Ulrich could never allow such a hidden danger to grow beneath his nose. Was it that impossible to find another refinement target among his 9 children? No, if it was just about fostering love, he could pick any one of them. Why was it then that he chose the most problematic ones, the most jiff? Conrad's eyes widened in sudden enlightenment. Could it be that from the beginning, if that is true, then I must be warier of him? Although it was only an assumption, Conrad couldn't help but think it held merit, and the implications made him shiver. Master, what is the nature of his bloodline? Half-fiend. However, the power of his fiend blood is sealed. Conrad spent the remainder of the night in silent cultivation. The next morning, 3 of his maids knocked on his doorstep to prepare him for his first official meeting with Ulrich. They brought with them several items. A luxurious black robe embroidered with a golden-winged serpent around which 9 stars hovered, a pair of golden boots, and a golden crown encrusted with 9 holy crystals. One maid helped him don the robe, while another tied his hairs to fit in the crown, and the last one placed the boots on his feet. Ulrich had not lain. Every single one of those items was a high-grade, semi-holy artifact that would fill the Empire's dukes with envy. But unbeknown to him, those were artifacts Conrad could already make use of. With a smile, he exited the mansion under the deferential gaze of the 60 servants. Conrad was forced to agree that Ulrich was a master in currying favor. The maids were outstanding in beauty, and the eunuchs competent and quick-witted. However, among them hid 2 third-step, semi-holy knights. It didn't take a genius to realize that on the one hand, Ulrich wanted to keep an eye on him while on the other end, he wished to make sure the likes of Adelar couldn't easily take his life. TSS, 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 adoptive father, you really are considerate. Conrad sneered and walked toward the imperial hall where officials gathered beneath the gaze of the emperor, who sat on his large golden throne with his holy crown resting on his head. The courtiers formed 2 lines, the left one for the civil officials and the right one for the military officials. They stood in order of official ranks rather than nobility titles, though the 2 were often matched. With their age and status, sovereign princes and dukes didn't serve as court officials. Therefore, the leading members of the court were the counts and margraves, with their cultivation going from the 6th-step transcendent knight rank to the 5th-step semi-holy rank. All came from ancient, Uridal families and could at some point in history retrace their lineage to a saint. His Grace, the Imperial Duke. The herald announced once Conrad reached the court hall's entrance. His eyes swept the dozens of officials lining beneath Ulrich. Then, he stepped forward, crossing the passage between the 2 rows of officials to stop before the stairs in a slow, steady walk. Father, your son greets you. Conrad knelt in greetings, causing many of the officials' eyes to contort into frowns. Rise, my son, and stand on my right. Conrad climbed the stairs to stand by Ulrich's side and looked down on the gathered officials whose eyes shone with displeasure and contempt. Clearly, They couldn't accept the reality of a human eunuch standing above them both in rank and title. However, none dared challenge Ulrich's will. All resentment and discontent they held remained suppressed within their hearts. From this height, Conrad could effortlessly see that with only one gaze, Ulrich kept them pinned in submission. This was power. Ulrich rose from his throne, presenting Conrad with his right hand. "Dear officials, I present to you my 9th son, His Grace the Imperial Duke, Conrad von Jürgen. Pay your respects." Ulrich ordered, and though his tone remained mild, it allowed no transgression. In this current moment, Conrad firmly believed that whoever showed an ounce of disagreement or hesitation would perish on the spot. He knew it, and so did the officials. Therefore, none dared delay and bowed toward him. "Greetings, Your Grace." The dozens of officials exclaimed with their backs bent, regardless of rank and title. Ulrich was satisfied. "From now on, His Grace shall be by my side throughout all imperial meetings. Get used to him." Though the officials couldn't accept this, they didn't dare object. Hubert Voigt could afford to challenge Ulrich. That was because his cultivation stood at the summit of the empire. But across this vast country of billions, there weren't 10 individuals capable of doing the same. That was power, and Conrad became more resolved to make that power his. Except in his case, there would not even be one man able to challenge him. Chapter 166, Inevitable Wedding. The remainder of the court session was uneventful. Officials presented their reports and petitions while offering advice on various problems the country faced. Ulrich listened to them dutifully, taking the appropriate measures to resolve all the issues brought to him. Conrad was forced to admit that in the role of emperor, Ulrich didn't laze around. As the session approached its end, a middle-aged official stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we've received news that the prosperous Wind Empire's 3rd prince set out yesterday. He brings with him legions of betrothal gifts and is on his way to take his bride." Ulrich's good mood died in a heartbeat. The man who announced the news could feel the pressure of Ulrich's gaze weighing down on him. He pitied himself for being the one having to say those words. However, if he didn't do his job, his head would, for sure, roll onto the floor. Ulrich's pressure vanished as quickly as it descended, and his eyes cleared up. "The prosperous Wind 3rd Prince is a man of honor and virtue. Entrusting my daughter to him, my heart is at ease. You may begin the preparations to receive him with the honors due to his rank." "Yes, Your Majesty." The official heaved a sigh of relief and excused himself. If there is nothing else, the court is dismissed. From highest rank to lowest, the court officials bowed and excused themselves, leaving only Conrad and Ulrich. Ulrich rose from his throne, leading Conrad back to his imperial study. "You've broken through to the Grand Priest rank?" "Yes, adoptive father." "Good. My efforts on you are not wasted. When you comprehend the first layer of the infernal soul-devouring art, we can truly begin your training. Although spiritual talent is much rarer than its martial counterpart, training a mighty priest is much easier than training a knight. As long as talent and resources are sufficient, rapid progress is natural." Ulrich dropped into his seat, letting a deep sigh bypass his lips. "Adoptive father, are you concerned about the impending arrival of the prosperous Wind 3rd Prince?" "How not to be? Although the prosperous Wind 3rd Prince is a man of honor and virtue, and their imperial family peaceful, the distance between the two countries is humongous. Should she marry him, in this life, I might never see her again. I only have this one daughter. Even if she must get married, it should be at home." Ulrich roared and slammed his clenched fist on the mahogany table facing him. Conrad couldn't tell what part of his words was acting and what part was reality. Was he not aware of Ulrich's true intentions, he would have really fallen by this show of the concerned father. A pity that he knew the real crux of the issue. With a smile, he stepped closer toward Ulrich, who stroked his temple within his fingers. "Is Your Majesty still considering ways to avoid the marriage?" Ulrich shook his head. "That is pointless. What way could there be? And don't say killing, or I will slap you. The world knows I tricked the church into believing my daughter was a boy, all for the sake of dodging those arranged marriages." If the third prince dies on the road, we are the first suspects. Having thoroughly offended the Great Void Empire, once we add the prosperous Wind Empire, the kingdom alliances will be willing to support them in a righteous attack against us. Individually, we don't fear any one of them. But once the four join hands, the result is unpredictable. Moreover, though weakened, the northern barbarian kingdom still stands. Once we show signs of weakness, they will knock on our doorsteps. All for what gains? Are we going to kill all the pure-blooded paragon spirit bachelors of the secular world? Another sigh escaped Ulrich's lips. What would be the consequence of outright rejection? This arrangement stems from the Celestial Church's will. If unable to carry it out, Gerhard will submit a petition to the Celestial Church. While they don't involve themselves in the matters of the secular world, they still hold the final say. Though his petition cannot reach the high level, it can grab the attention of a deacon, which is enough to bring us trouble. Conrad's eyes widened in surprise. The Holy Flame Church's head exarch's petition cannot reach the Celestial Church's high level? Ulrich sneered. How could it ever? Disciples aside, the Celestial Church is divided into 4 levels: Celestial Priests, Celestial Deacons, Celestial Protectors, and Celestial Elders. Elders are at the divine rank, Protectors at the star-taming stage, and Deacons at the cross-tribulation saint rank. As for the priests, the weakest are at the rising saint rank. You tell me, in such a dreadful structure, what weight could one Gerhard have? The Celestial Church only needs to dispatch one random protector to turn this country into ashes, and they have hundreds of them. Hundreds of protesters, thousands of deacons, tens of thousands of priests. You tell me what weight we can possibly have in their eyes. Therefore, even Gerhard isn't willing to request help. Not only would he lose his face as head exarch, but he couldn't escape punishment. Unless some new development occurs, this marriage is unavoidable. Conrad was startled. Their saints number, in the tens of thousands? Right. Therefore, in this world, besides the infernal cult, anyone who attempts to challenge the Celestial Church's will is courting death. Ulrich could never forget the day his father brought him alongside his brothers to pay their respect to the Celestial Church. The humiliation of spending 3 days at their doorstep. The awe caused by the legions of tyrannical auras that awaited inside to suppress them in silence. And the gazes that looked at them like inferior monkeys unworthy of dignity. Ulrich would always remember that shame. And even if it took 10,000 years, he would wipe it all off. Summon the princess. She should at least become aware of her inevitable wedding. Ulrich's voice spread to the imperial eunuchs guarding the entrance, and they immediately departed to summon Nils. Meanwhile, as he stood by his side, a strange light flashed within Conrad's eyes. In less than 5 minutes, the eunuchs returned with Nils, who stood between them. They then excused themselves, returning to guard the entrance. Father, what can I do for you? Ulrich's eyes rose to meet Nils, and the lack of vigor he saw within daggered him. These days, in his presence, she was always like this, showing no sign of her past exuberance. In a week at worst, the prosperous Wind Third Prince will arrive to officially request your hand. I've sought all possible solutions, but avoiding it is impossible. You will soon get married. As he spoke, Ulrich's tone was mild and helpless. All daughters must ultimately get married. That is only natural. Father, don't worry. I won't make things difficult for you. When the third prince arrives, we shall go through the betrothal ceremony, and I will follow him back to the prosperous Wind Empire to become his dead wife. Nils replied in a polite bow that caused the faces of both Ulrich and Conrad to contort into frowns. Huh. As she raised her head, Nils got a glimpse of that sudden change of face. Although Conrad's quickly returned to its usual shape, the frown didn't escape her eyes. Her father she could understand, but what did any of this have to do with that Conrad? Or did she misunderstand his gaze? Chapter 167, Grow My Son. What do you mean by this? The rising fury within Ulrich's tone brought Nils' attention back onto him. Ignoring that Conrad's odd look, she carried on. I mean, exactly what I say. I will go through the betrothal process and follow the third prince back to the prosperous Wind Empire. There, I will orchestrate my death on the eve of the wedding. You. Ulrich rose from his seat with eyes set ablaze by rage. Nils, I've heard you say a lot of nonsense, but this definitely trumps everything else. Who's asking you to kill yourself? Are you out of your mind? Or do you think you can use your life to threaten me? Initially, Ulrich believed Nils was merely throwing a fit, hoping to force him into fighting against all the odds to preserve her life. Conrad thought the same. However, her following words quickly convinced them of otherwise. My mind has never been clearer. On the contrary, it is father that doesn't see the opportunity clearly. Allow me to explain. Nils began in a calm, serious tone that filled Ulrich with confusion. Marriage is inevitable. We're all aware of that. In fact, great void or prosperous wind, to me it's all the same. Foreign land heralding days of sorrow. Moreover, I feel our family still owes someone a life. Since none of you are going to repay it, I should do it on your behalf and apologize to him in heaven. That is my first reason. However, I understand that we owe our lives to our parents. I don't dare give it up without first paying back what I owe you. You can dispatch trusted maids as my ladies, in waiting to follow me to the prosperous Wind Empire. On the eve of the wedding, they can kill me and blame my death on masked assassins. Regardless of the truth, the prosperous Wind Empire cannot shoulder this responsibility. Therefore, they will shift the blame on foreign nations. Since the Great Void Empire is no pushover, and the Water Kingdom Alliance has no cause, the Earth Kingdom Alliance will most likely become the scapegoat. You can then dispatch troops with a righteous cause and with a father's grief, conquer their lands. The Earth Temple will work alongside the Holy Flame Church to stop you. But with the righteous cause to support you, they can't stop you from taking at least half of the Earth Kingdom Alliance's territory. You can then shift targets on Prosperous Wind, blaming them for not protecting me to carry out a lightning war of vengeance. The cities you plan to keep, you conquer. The cities you are willing to give up, you slaughter. Destroy the foundations of those two forces before caving into the church branch's demands. Hence, obliterate the balance between the 5 states while using your gains to expand your forces. If you do this, Father, in less than 5 centuries you can unify the Holy Continent. For such achievements, isn't my life a good bargain? Conrad scowled, and Ulrich shivered. This was a dreadful plan showing a ruthless heart. Even if she felt wronged and apologetic toward Anselm, such words could never come from her lips. Using her life to cause the deaths of Legion? How could such thoughts stem from her? If Conrad could see this, how could Ulrich not? He leaped across the table to stop before Nils and seize her face in his hands while staring into her eyes with bloodshot eyes. Who told you this? No one. Ulrich's holy force erupted, spreading within Nils' soul to analyze it through and through. However, he couldn't find anything. The only strange sight was the desperate need for self-sacrifice and atonement. Meanwhile, Adelar sat within his chambers with Lorenz by his side. Following last night's events, Loren's heart overflowed with fright, and he repeatedly kowtowed to be for Adelar's forgiveness. His forehead still carried the bruises of his brutal kowtows. While Adelar didn't seem to take it to heart, Lorenz couldn't be at ease. It should be about now. I wonder how Father will react. The daughter, or the world? What do you mean by that? Lorenz stammered. Nils is about to make unparalleled contributions and open the road for House von Jürgen's world hegemony. How can such benefits compare to fatherly love? What value could she possibly have that is greater than this? I hope Father won't disappoint me. The more they looked at Nils, the more convinced Conrad and Ulrich were that her mind had been tampered with. However, the method left absolutely no trace. Conrad's mind drifted to Adelar. He must have used his powers to implant the thought in Nils' mind. But when? Like he said, he is now unscrupulous. I must get rid of him as soon as possible. Conrad's eyes shifted to Ulrich, who still scrutinized Nils' soul. As he did, a strange light flashed within his eyes. Vast gray mist erupted from Ulrich's body to infiltrate Nils' soul and spread within. Indeed, Adelar didn't take control of her. Instead, He empowered her guilt toward Anselm and heightened her selflessness while lowering her gentleness. He then increased the value of family glory and filial piety in her mind to let her come up with this thought on her own. He must have mastered a form of soul projection and avatar condensation. No wonders tracking his moves have become so difficult. What a good son I have. Good, very good. Ulrich erased Adler's manipulations on Nil's mind, returning her to her old self. What am I saying? Father, you can't listen to me. War will cause the deaths of tens of thousands and destroy the lives of the common people. I don't want to be the cause of their sufferings. Even if you want to do harm, you can't use my name for it. Nils yelped and leaped like a startled fawn, then scratched her head, wondering why such words came from her lips. Ulrich released a sigh of relief. A shame that it is too early. Grow, my good son, grow, but not during my sleep. Ulrich thought, restraining his murder urges. Witnessing this scene, Conrad became more confident in his assumption. And if he were right, Adler's threat was minimal. The real danger stood before him. To match the situation, his eyes showed extreme confusion. Ulrich turned toward him with a gaze that seemed to be saying, "Don't ask." So, Conrad nodded in silent agreement. "Conrad, that will be all for today. Please escort the princess back to her quarters. She doesn't have many trustworthy people by her side. I hope the two of you can get along." Ulrich's tone mixed sorrow and helplessness. "As you wish, father." He then excused himself, leading Nils out of Ulrich's study to cross the halls and exit his palace. "Hey, why did you look so disturbed when mentioned becoming the prosperous Wind Third Prince's dead wife?" Nils asked with curious, blinking eyes as they left Ulrich's palace. "That doesn't sound disturbing to you?" "Nonsense. It almost looked like someone was robbing your possession." Conrad's steps abruptly stopped, causing Nils, who didn't expect the sudden stop, to bump against his back and recoil. "Ouch, why did you just stop?" Nils yelled while rubbing her nose that hurt the most. She was about to carry on with her outrage and demand compensation when Conrad made a 180-degree turn, facing her with a piercing gaze that silenced her on the spot. As they peered in one another's eyes, that misconception returned. Again, she saw someone else. "Who the hell are you? You call yourself my property and ask me who I am? From where I'm from, some would call me your master. Little sister, you shouldn't lose decorum." "You bully, Nils pointed an accusatory finger on Conrad, but before she could say anything else, he left. "Am by 1 year your senior." Conrad's sudden departure left a sour taste within Nils' mouth, and she resolved to investigate him at night. Returning to his mansion, Conrad summoned Kron. "How may I serve you, master?" Conrad stood still for one moment, then condensed a phantasm orchid in his right hand, while summoning his space talisman in his left. "The prosperous Wind Third Prince is on his way with betrothal gifts. With such a convoy, there is only one road he can follow. I will give you the coordinates. Your job is to slaughter his entourage, seize his betrothal gifts into this space treasure, severely injure and castrate him, then force him to swallow this phantasm orchid." Conrad turned to face Kron with a bone-chilling pair of eyes. "Remember, he mustn't die. Only stay half an inch into death. Then you will watch over him, helping him recover from the shadows and make sure he returns safely to his country. I will take care of the rest," Conrad ordered, and the 2 items flew into Kron's hands. "As you command, master." Chapter 168 Witness the Depth of My Evil Heart Part 1. Following Kron's departure, Conrad sat crossed-legged within his cultivation chamber to refine soul expansion pills and pursue the second layer of the infernal soul-devouring art. In a flash, the daylight made way for the darkened sky and descending night. Conrad's body bathed in dark fog, and though he made considerable progress, the second layer still eluded him. As the dark fog dispersed, Kron's voice echoed within Conrad's mind. "Master, the ambush is a success. The entourage slaughtered, the betrothal gifts pocketed, and the third prince maimed. As you commanded, I forced him to swallow the phantasm orchid." The average holy knight could reach a speed of 100 kilometers per second. Therefore, in a few minutes, Kron's ambush was ready. He picked a spot far from the prosperous Wind capital, but still within their sphere of influence to await their third prince's passage and carry out his assault. After several hours of patient lurking, the prosperous Wind third prince's convoy arrived. What happened afterward was simple enough. The poor man only brought with him one rising saint elder, several semi-saints, and a few dozen transcendent knights. How could they resist Kron? The rising saint was beheaded in one blow, and the rest soon followed him to the grave. Good. Now, I can make my move. Don't forget to use some of your demonic energies to give him enough strength to return to their capital. While Adler's troublemaking abilities gave Conrad murder urges, his thoughts held merit. Only by shattering the equilibrium between the 5 states could they facilitate the Holy Flame Empire's unification of the continent. And though, granted they possessed Paragon's spirit blood and followed its rules, the Celestial Church did not care about the secular world's rulers and the state of the countries. For its branches, it was a different matter. After all, their power relied on the existence of the various states. Should one collapse, its related branch would greatly suffer. Therefore, they always worked in tacit understanding to limit the scope of internal warfare and preserve their respective influence. To break that balance required a dreadful war backed by a righteous cause. Conrad closed his eyes, activating the phantasm flower within the prosperous Wind third prince's body. His maimed form glittered in purple light, and within his soul, a miniature Conrad appeared. That miniature Conrad released vast purple fog that spread throughout the third prince's soul. "Who are you?" A miniature version of the third prince asked, confused and startled by the brutal events and the sudden appearance of this youth within his mind. "Your new master." The third prince's eyes widened upon hearing those words. However, purple chains bound him from all sides, preventing struggles. What do you want from me? You and I have no enmity. What grievances can my prosperous Wind Empire possibly have with you for you to harm me so?" Conrad's closed eyes opened, his shimmering purple hues striking the third prince with dread. "None whatsoever." Anger and indignation flared in the third prince's eyes. "I just want you to help me trigger a world war." But before he could let that indignation burst through righteous words, Conrad again startled him. World war? Conrad said nothing further, first taking control of the third prince's memories, then rewriting them to replace the scene of Kron's ambush by that of masked assassins wielding Earth Kingdom Alliance's state treasures and spells. In that scene, the prosperous Wind Empire's rising Saint Elder battled tooth and nails to open a way out for his prince, before self-destructing to force the assassins into retreat. However, in the heat of the fight, he managed to unmask one of the assassins, revealing a well-known Earth Kingdom Alliance elder. That done, Conrad let Kron follow the third prince on his desperate rush back home. "Master, I don't understand. What do you hope to accomplish through this?" The prosperous Wind Emperor is a meek man whose only redeeming quality is his profound affection for his relatives, especially his children. Whoever dares harm them, he must kill. What do you think happens when his third son returns in such a wretched state, carrying with him the news of his ambush and rising Saint Uncle's death at the hands of the Earth Kingdom Alliance? War, Kron replied without delay. Right. Moreover, castration is a royal's greatest shame. The prosperous Wind Emperor could have his church fix this through a restoration baptism, but to keep their mouths shut, paying a hefty price is unavoidable. Maimed son, dead brother, deep humiliation. To say nothing of an emperor, the average man cannot take this slight. Therefore, he will dispatch troops and barrel into the Earth Kingdom Alliance. Unfortunately, for him, the political situation is complex. The Great Void Emperor's eldest sister turns out to be the Earth Kingdom Alliance King's wife. While their family is known for its heartlessness, that's an internal matter. Letting his sister fall to harm due to the prosperous Wind Emperor's wrath would be a slap on the Great Void Emperor's face. Therefore, be it due to their relationship with the Earth Kingdom Alliance, or the safekeeping of their imperial dignity, Great Void cannot let this pass. To say nothing of the face they lost when Nil's gender was revealed and her hand given to Prosperous Wind. Great Void will join the dance with massive troops, ready to counter and oppress Prosperous Wind. To do so, their troops must cross the Water Kingdom alliance that separates them from Prosperous Wind. As Conrad's words carried on, Kron's mind shone with enlightenment. If the Water Kingdom alliance gives them free passage, they must join the war. Otherwise, when it ends, Prosperous Wind will never let them off. If they don't join, they will still be implicated because Great Void will force its way through. Therefore, regardless of their will, regardless of their choice, they must fight. Thus, leaving my holy flame empire to reap the benefits. Conrad's lips curled into a devious smile. Great Void has always been our greatest contender in the Holy Continent. What kind of man is Ulrich? Once such an opportunity to weaken them presents itself, how could he not grasp it? He will first observe and wait, letting the two sides sink deeper into the war before using the principle of avenging his in-laws to launch an attack. With righteousness on his side, the Church cannot stop him from dispatching troops. Hence, allowing him to establish the foundation for my holy flame empire's hegemony. At the same time, he will no longer be able to pay me much attention and entirely focus on this matter's developments. Thus, I can regain most of my lost freedom and carry on with the country's seepage. Kron's mouth formed an O shape, and as he stared at the Prosperous Wind third prince from a distance, as a demon familiar, he couldn't help but envy the fool that was about to trigger a world war for his master's benefit. Conrad's smile dispersed, and he stood up. Was Nils getting married to another man a disturbing thought? Certainly. Was it enough for him to go to such lengths? Absolutely not. If it was just about keeping her home, he could just devise means to impregnate her. What need was there for all this trouble? In this plan, benefit drove him, and from all he stood to gain, the first profit was how he could soon free Vaughn of Ulrich's attention and sneak back to her side. Although semi-saints and above were forbidden to join regular wars, they could serve other purposes such as assassination, infrastructure destruction, and intelligence gathering. Imperial power being his first priority, Ulrich would focus all his resources into controlling the war to his advantage. Where would he find the time to spy on Yvonne, whose poison was already under his control? And while he turned his back on the inner court to focus on state affairs, Conrad could silently take over it while giving his most precious plenty of love. He crossed his arms beneath his back, letting his thoughts drift. Although her pure self remained by his side, the feeling of not being able to hold Yvonne's true self was becoming unbearable. And as for the legions that would perish to divert Ulrich's attention, it was their glory. But as Conrad anticipated the future events, knock, 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 a knocking sound broke his reverie. What? Your Grace, the princess is here requesting an audience. Conrad frowned, but as quickly as it came, it dispersed. Very well, bring her in. In any case, it was time to handle that situation for good. Since Nils dared delivered herself, how could he not accept her? That would be impolite. Chapter 169 Witness the Depth of My Evil Heart Part 2. Nils crossed the corridor leading to Conrad's cultivation chamber with a pair of maids by her side. Since her last interaction with him, she became more confident in that eunuch hiding deep secrets, and her heart thumped with trepidation. The trio soon reached the door where the maids stopped to announce Nils' arrival. His Grace, the Imperial Duke ordered us to let you in. However, we won't follow your Highness inside. We shall now take our leave. If your Highness needs anything, feel free to call for us. The maids curtsied, turned heels and left, leaving only Nils to hesitantly stare at the door. For some incomprehensible reason, she began dreading what she would find inside. With a deep breath, she strengthened her resolve and pushed the door open to step inside the room. But as the door closed behind her, her eyes widened in disbelief. The man standing before her faced the opposite window, leaving only his back to greet her. Effortlessly, she recognized the Imperial Duke robe, tailored specifically for him, as well as the 9-jeweled crown donning his head. However, The long green hairs that cascaded at his back didn't match his previous appearance and filled her with a mixture of fright and expectations. The man turned, facing her with a figure that turned disbelief into shock. Though handsome, his appearance wasn't particularly extraordinary. Among the many von Juergensscions, finding more striking was a piece of cake. Yet, those pairs of emerald eyes instantly threw Nils' heart off balance. Anselm? Anselm didn't reply, staring into Nils' silver eyes with an indifferent look while his hands rested on either side of his waist. Nils took a trembling step forward, and before she knew it, she threw herself onto Anselm's chest, wrapping her lithe arms around his back while warm tears trickled down her cheeks. "It's you. It's really you. You're alive." Anselm said nothing, and as Nils' eyes rose from his chest to meet his, a startling sight awaited. The emerald eyes and hairs had turned black, while the face reverted to that of the effeminate ninth brother. Alarmed, Nils pushed herself away from him with a shove and teetered as she regained her foothold. Anselm didn't budge, his body as immovable as a rock, and before she could understand what was going on, his figure once again morphed. This time, his height increased to 185 meters while his eyes turned into a shimmering purple. His slender body rippled with perfect muscles while his chest and shoulders broadened, and his face became a masterfully carved artwork eclipsing deities. Were it not for his expression that remained the same throughout the two transformations, Nils could never believe that from the start, she was dealing with the same person. And yet, she was. So that's how it is. From the start, you wore a mask to trick the world. This is your true form. Nils stammered, and her mind browsed through the many possibilities that now appeared to her while her eyes trembled and her tears unceasingly flowed. What if it is? What if it's not? Conrad asked with his lips curling into a dissolute smile as he took a leisurely step forward. With Nils being 15 centimeters shorter, he towered above her and had to lower his gaze to seize hers. Unable to withstand the pressure of his eyes, Nils attempted to take another step back, but before she could, Conrad held her waist, pulling her back against his chest while maintaining eye contact. "You and I both know it is inconsequential. Regardless of what mask I wear, my eyes will still hold you captive," Conrad declared while lifting Nils' chin and lowering his face toward hers so that their noses almost brushed one another. Nils' heart rate shot up. Why chase the dead? Why antagonize relatives? Why come here with this palpable, mixed scent of expectation and dread? The answer is simple. Your heart has long since surrendered to me. The belief that you'll never again feel my presence haunts you because you crave me. Nils' heart threatened to burst from her chest, and she shivered within Conrad's arms. The heart is willful, desires uncontrollable. Once you surrender to them, you can never regain the reins. They become the masters, and you the slave. Conrad's lips grazed Nils, his steady breath and mild orchid scent overwhelming her. Conrad then leaned in, taking her lips into his for an ardent kiss. At first, Nils couldn't resist, surrendering to the sensation of his tongue dancing with hers. But as their minds connected, her eyes shone with renewed vigor, and she shoved Conrad away. "You change," she stated in enlightenment. "Before you were just a hoodlum. Self-centered, perhaps. Ruthless to enemies, definitely. But your callousness was limited, and your humanity still palpable. But now, you're truly heartless. Whose emotions and fate do you consider before you make a move? And where do I stand on your spectrum?" Nils didn't mention that she now understood Conrad plotted the fall of her two brothers. She didn't mention it because it was inconsequential. From her father, she now realized that even if he didn't move against them, they would still butcher him, if only to remove a hidden danger. To save his life and preserve his woman, he had to fight. She could understand the principle. However, the method showed a callous heart and caused the death of at least one innocent. And now that he again stood before her, his mesmerizing eyes didn't conceal the oppressive darkness that existed within, making her feel that compared to him, Elmar was an inoffensive choir boy. "I just grew to accept my true self," Considerations? As long as it doesn't harm someone I care for, all is correct. For those who climb the ladder of supremacy, building a few piles of corpses along the road is nothing. A man must strive for might, for absolute domination. Unless your will reigns supreme, all you possess can be taken at will. Women, wealth, dignity. If I didn't scheme the fall of your brothers, wouldn't I now be watching my woman under Holger's crotch? Watching from the grave, that is. But why do I need to scheme? Because I am feeble. Were I mighty, I could just butcher him, butcher Elmar, butcher anyone that dared oppose and threaten me. The ferocity of Conrad's words forced the trembling Nils against the door, and when she realized she could no longer step back, she mustered her strength to again face him. Can't you just enjoy life beside your loved ones? Away from strife, away from woes? Is there really a need for supremacy? Don't tell me that the weak are forever barred from freedom and happiness. Bwahahaha. Hearing those naive words, Conrad burst into laughter and slammed his palms against the door, trapping Nils in between. It's because of words like these that I like you. Don't you want to know your worth in my eyes? Wrong. It's not about what you mean to me, but about what I mean to you. Conrad began in a gentle yet tyrannical tone. I want to be your guilty pleasure. The wine you take, knowing it will harm your livers. The more I look at you, the more I want to stain you, ruin your purity, and pull you into my world of depravity. Conrad's corrupt words triggered Nils' outrage, but before she could let it burst, a commotion came from the outside. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of colliding blades reached the pair's ears. Conrad frowned, spreading his soul power to access the outer situation, and what he saw caused his lips to curl into a devilish grin. That smile made Nils shiver. Without a word, Conrad pushed the door open, and with his arms crossed beneath his back, exited his mansion. Nils followed suit, and what she saw startled her. Two of Conrad's unremarkable eunuchs were now battling tooth and nails with masked assailants, showing dreadful cultivation she couldn't estimate. What is the meaning of this? The realities of the world. Even if you mean no harm, jealousy, spite, and apprehension are enough for the mightier to shred your life. Bang! The two imperial eunuchs flew with blood spurting from their lips, falling before Conrad, who'd reassumed his imperial duke disguise. Your Grace, His Majesty, let us hide within your staff to ensure your safety. Please don't worry. We'll use our lives to open an escape road for you. The assailants had sealed the area with a semi-holy force shield, preventing any noise from escaping. Thus, the imperial eunuchs could only try their hardest to open a path for Nils and Conrad, hoping they could hold the assailants long enough for the two to escape and alert the emperor. But at that time, new forms appeared from the shadows, and as the eunuchs rose, desperation filled their eyes. 16 men now stood before them, 5 fifth-step semi-holy knights, and 11 ninth-step transcendent knights. Such a dreadful lineup was enough to eradicate any Margrave-level house, who was so ruthless as to dispatch this force for Conrad's life. But as the eunuchs and Nils considered their options, Conrad's smile remained unchanged. The eunuchs raised their weapons, still ready to fight against all the odds. However, before they could launch themselves into a desperate fight, a slender pair of hands pierced their chests from behind, causing blood to erupt from their backs, chest, and mouth. The imperial eunuchs turned their trembling heads to see the origin of this backstabbing, but when Conrad's face appeared as the culprit, disbelief filled their eyes. How could it be you? Not only them, but Nils and the 16 assailants also couldn't believe their eyes. I'd already been looking for an opportunity to get rid of you. Being Ulrich's men, you can't blame me. Don't worry, you won't die yet. Conrad retracted his hands, causing the eunuch's gushing blood to drench the floor and stain his regal clothes in red. They dropped onto the floor, their state unknown. Conrad leisurely stepped forward, his eyes sweeping the masked assailants with amusement. Adelar is truly kind-hearted, feeding me with so many high-level transcendent knights and semi-saints. I will have to thank him in the future. Conrad joked while assessing the cultivations of his enemies. I give you one opportunity. Only one. Surrender and thrive. Oppose me and perish. The choice is yours. Conrad stretched out his arms, his miraculous transcendence erupting alongside the power of his meridians, while his bone-chilling eyes daggered his foes. And Nils, who stood at his back, couldn't help but feel that in this particular moment, Conrad looked more dreadful than her father ever did. The assailants could feel his cultivation was merely at the 5th step of the Transcendent Knight rank. Although the intensity was something they'd never faced before, they didn't dread him, blaming the fallen Imperial eunuch's fate on carelessness. Kill. Whoever takes his head, His Highness will reward handsomely. Chapter 170 Collapsing World. Just like he said, Adelar was now unscrupulous, convinced that for whatever purpose he served, Ulrich didn't dare severely harm him, yet. Even if he could retrace Conrad's death to him afterward, Adelar was convinced that loving father would swallow his anger. However, before they could lead their fellow assailants to take Conrad's neck, the masked semi-saints felt a gush of wind graze their cheeks. At first, they thought nothing of it, but when Conrad vanished from their sight and a warm fluid splattered them from behind, their faces contorted into frowns. They turned heels, fast enough to witness the scene of their 11 comrades' heads soaring into the air, their necks torn by bare hands. Still, there was no sight of Conrad, only another breeze. Again, they turned, and he was back where he stood, the only difference being his hands painted with their comrades' blood. The 5 semi-holy knights were startled. Initially, they believed Conrad overestimated his abilities, but now, they realized they were the careless ones. Still, since things had reached this point, they could only fight. Each brandished their energy weapons and shot toward Conrad. His miraculous transcendence swirled around him in the form of rainbow-colored light. Before the quintet could reach him, the rainbow-colored transcendence spread toward them, enfeebling them at breakneck speed. What kind of transcendent force is this? Although they each possessed more than 1,000 years of cultivation, they'd never heard of miraculous transcendence. To them, even absolute transcendence was a legend, impossible to achieve. Quickly, they realized their semi-holy force had been thoroughly suppressed by Conrad's transcendence, leaving them unable to exert even 10% of their power. Conrad's arm jerked forward in a casual palm strike, and simultaneously, the 5/5 step semi-holy knights flew back, their chests caving under clear palm imprints. Blood gushed from their mouths as they crashed onto the floor. The semi-holy force field they used to nullify noise vanished. Therefore, Conrad replaced it with a force field of his own. The group leader was flabbergasted, unable to believe his eyes. The gap of an entire rank, the gap of the transcendent and semi-holy rank stands between us. How can you be this strong? This was not only horrifying but made no sense. With just the power of transcendence and meridians, that boy could effortlessly cross an entire rank to butcher his foes. Then didn't that mean that as long as he went all out, even high-level semi-saints would be forced into retreat? How did such a monster suddenly appear within the palace? What was the source of his strength? Conrad ignored them, black fog swirling around him and spreading to the invisible souls of the 11 deceased transcendent knights. In a flash, he refined them all, causing his soul power to expend at wild speed. If you can't back up your words, it is arrogance. If you can, it is merely confidence. I've yet to meet anyone that makes me feel arrogant. Your pathetic lot will certainly not be the first. Conrad sneered and raised his hands, causing massive telekinetic power to trap and lift the bodies of the 5 semi-holy knights. With a grasping motion, they flew toward him. The same black fog extended from his fingers to infiltrate their souls and refine it as they breathed. As for why I'm this strong, blame it on fate. Eorg. The 5 men's ghastly roars hammered Nil's ears. The situation had already evolved into something she couldn't comprehend. As the refinement ended, Conrad's soul power reached shocking levels. Although those were knights and not priests, The intensity of their soul was magnified by their high cultivation base, allowing Conrad to successively complete 3 transformations and reach the 8th step of the transcendent priest rank. He then let their lifeless bodies drop onto the ground and turned toward the 2 imperial eunuchs whose lives hanged by a thread. 2 phantasm orchids appeared within his hands, then dived into the 2 men's mouths. Mouths Conrad forced open through telekinetic power. The orchids were pushed down their throats, and as they reached their stomachs, purple light burst from within to heal their wounds. Witnessing this scene, Nils was baffled. What was the need to first maim, then heal the same people? Of course, she didn't realize that as soon as the orchids lodged themselves within them, those eunuchs became Conrad's slaves. He then turned toward the 16 corpses covering the ground, gathering them all before Nils. Remove their masks and tell me who they are. Conrad's voice and Nils' own curiosity drove her toward the corpses whose masks she removed one after the other. Each face shocked her to the core of her soul. And by the time she reached the last one, she couldn't stand on her feet and dropped onto the ground. The Imperial Guard, high-ranking members of the Imperial Guard, every single one of them. How could this be? She clearly remembered the words, His Highness. Not His Majesty, His Highness. What highness could possibly command the Imperial Guard's high-ranking officials? Even Elmar at his peak didn't have that clout. Others can't, but your second brother can? Conrad replied to Nils' unspoken question as if reading her mind. Adelar? Impossible. With what has he bribed them? Can serving as semi-saint prince compare to being the Emperor's guard? What if their minds are no longer their own? Nils vigorously shook her head. That's not possible. Even the strongest paragon spirit in the country cannot take over the mind of others. Spiritual mist alone doesn't have that skill. To say nothing of Adelar being a half-blood. And even if he could somehow develop such a dreadful skill, how could he do it beneath Father's gaze? Why would Father watch as his trusted officials became his sons? Nils denied Conrad's words. He waved his hand, causing a conflagration to burn the 16 corpses to ashes. What if he doesn't care? What if it doesn't matter? What if regardless of what he did, Adelar could never escape his palm? Conrad forced Nils back onto her feet and clasped her head within his strong palms. What are you doing? You're hurting me. To awake you, I must hurt you. Having one of the chosen ones before him, it was time for Conrad to test his theory. Vast purple fog erupted from him and snuck into Nils' mind, diving into her soul to allow him free passage. Arg! Nils roared, veins beating on her temples as Conrad barreled into the hidden barriers within her soul. Within Nils' soul, a miniature Conrad stood on purple fog to analyze her inner self through and through. But he couldn't find anything. Could it be that I'm wrong? No, that's not possible. Somewhere here lies the answer to my fears. If I can't find it, then it means someone turned truth into falsehood and reality into a dream. The miniature Conrad stretched out his arms, causing his phantasm lord energies to spread within Nils' soul. Indeed, Conrad raised his palms, and the gray world of Nils' soul shattered, crushed like broken glasses. Behind it, an identical world reappeared. Nils howled and fainted within Conrad's hands. But at the same time, a miniature version of her appeared by his side to witness her inner soul world. What is this? But before Nils could say anything, Conrad pulled her by the hand to head deeper into her soul world. At the lowest level, a dreadful sight awaited. Witnessing it, Nils' eyes were overwhelmed by horror. This is. A 20 meters long, dormant gray worm slept at the root of Nils' soul. I naturally don't need to explain what this is to you. This is a pure-blooded paragon spirit's most horrible ability. Not many can master it, and those who do never reveal it. Because by decree of the Celestial Church, its use is forbidden. I guess because it destroys the Church's holy face. The soul worm. Soul worms were nigh impossible to detect and planted themselves within the root of an individual's soul. To remove them without ruining the soul required otherworldly skills. At first dormant, once activated, The soul worm would paralyze its host and take possession of their soul to transform them into lifeless puppets for its master to do with as he saw fit. If the master wanted the host to endure the pain of 10,000 deaths, they would. In a distant age, the celestial church's paragon spirits used soul worms to enforce the obedience of the masses. However, the inevitable result was that many saw them as no different from the infernal cult and flocked to the demon god's banner to save themselves. Therefore, they banned its use. Even in her wildest dream, Nils had never expected that such a thing would appear within her mind. And yet, here it was. Who? Stupid question. Don't ask what you already know. Who is close enough and powerful enough to do this before you could ever be aware of it? You know better than I do. Not only you, but I suspect your eldest brother, your second brother, the Empress and the Holy Consort are all under the threat of a soul worm. Conrad's words echoed within Nils' mind with the figure of the man that had doted on her for 18 years. And in less than 5 seconds, her world collapsed. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.